Hi, I'm Trevor, and today's episode of Catching on Cinema is going to be a theatrical edition. As it so happens, my brother and I went out to see a theatrical film by the name of Triple Threat. It was a one-night-only event on March 13th. It's directed by Jesse V. Johnson and starring a who's who of martial arts actors that you've probably never heard of. Thank you very much, Matt, for coming with me. I recruited you to join me in the theater because, one, I don't go to theaters alone. I find it very depressing. And two, you're pretty much like the only other person I could think of that could even begin to attempt to appreciate the spectacle that was going to be on the screen. Because, like I said, the cast is made up of like a who's who of B-movie, like direct-to-video stars that you know mostly because I'm always talking about them to you, but at the same time, there's like one or two people in there that you actually do know and can appreciate.
Well, and we all know that there was no way in hell you were ever going to get Kyle to watch this one. So.
No. Mr. Kyle Mr. Kyle actually texted me before I went to see this. Kyle being my typical co-host on Catching Up on Cinema. He texted me right before I went, and he said, I want a head count of how many people are in the theater.
And how many did you get?
I think like 8, not including us, maybe?
I got closer to 13. But
13? Okay.
Yeah, there were a few that came late.
There was a couple like elderly Asian couples.
Sure.
There was like a couple of husband and wife pairings, and a couple of really skinny teenagers sitting in the row with us. But yeah, it was not a packed house. In fact, we were joking because when we were walking into the auditorium, the poster that was up on the wall beside the auditorium was Wonder Park, which is apparently a absolutely horrible animated film. I think it's produced by Nickelodeon.
Yeah, I kind of had that look.
But I guess the horror story about the production of it is that it was made without a director.
Oh, gosh.
So it's just like, we have scenes. Find a way to make them work. Movie. But yeah, before we walked into Triple Threat, an R-rated action film, the poster on the wall was like a friendly rainbow-colored teddy bear on something called Wonder Park.
Yeah, they didn't even bother to put up the temporary poster for the one night only event.
I don't think they printed posters for this movie. It's very low budget. And it was a one-night-only theatrical event, quote, air quotes, event. So I think the expense of printing and distributing posters was probably too great. And I'm laughing about this. I actually didn't hate the film at all. I actually quite enjoyed parts of it. It does have its problems, but the thing you need to know right up front is this is a very low-budget film. It's not going to compete with like a blockbuster film or even like a John Wick or something, which isn't like an astronomically high-budgeted film, but the amount of resources available to these filmmakers was much less than something you'd normally see in the theater, I guess.
I mean, I would argue it's substantially less than you would see on your average television show or even Netflix original. Like it was very like bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, to their credit, they did have some legit squibs in there.
Yeah,
which is something
that was refreshing.
Even in like multi-$100-million Hollywood films, you don't see that because I guess the logistics of rigging up squibs and hiring pyrotechnic technicians and stuff to work on the set all day long is too much. And I'm sure in the editing room, it's a pain in the ass too, because anything done physically on the set is going to afford you less options of control.
Yeah.
And you can tell that there were certain instances in this movie where like some of the stunt work and some of the practical effects and stuff probably cost them some time and probably didn't go as planned, but it's like, whatever, that's what we got in the can, that's what we got in the editing room.
Well, why don't you run us through the cast so those out there who may be interested in this limited theatrical release and why you went out of your way to go see it.
Yeah, I might ramble a bit, so give me a T sign if I'm going over the limit here. But my history with this film, Triple Threat, dates back like nearly 3 years. It was announced about that long ago. So like maybe 2016, maybe early 2017. So I've been waiting a very long time to see this. The main reason, and I think this goes for most like casual action fans out there, that I was interested in this film is that Scott Adkins is in it.
Sure.
I've talked about him on the show before. We did an episode, a very early episode for the show on Undisputed 2, which featured Scott Adkins in a fairly prominent role as the antagonist. He's also the antagonist in this one. But on top of Scott Adkins, the gimmick of this movie is that it's essentially like a parallel to the Expendables franchise, but more specifically, the niche subgenre of like martial arts films.
Yeah.
So the cast is, for me, who obsesses about these types of movies, is insanely deep. At the top, you have Tony Jaa, who we all know for Ong Bak and Tom Yong-gun. And more recently, I feel like the Chinese have adopted him because he's like kind of headlining. And he's not headlining, but he's featured in a lot of Chinese films recently. I think it's because there's a lack of martial arts talent in the Chinese market these days.
Okay.
So you're starting to see like people age out. You're starting to see like it's like wrestling, where it's like we're still pushing out Michelle Yeoh in the wheelchair because we ain't got nobody else. It's like Hulk Hogan like stumbling. It's like the WrestleMania where the NWO and Sting fought and Degeneration X went at it. But you have Tony Jaa at the top, Michael Jai White, who has worked with both Tony Jaa and Scott Adkins before, Black Dynamite, or if you've seen The Dark Knight, he's the crime boss that gets the knife in the mouth, Gamble. Enough with the clown. A couple of other folks that are lesser known. Ron Smorenberg is one of the bad guys. He's a Dutch fella. I guess he lives in Thailand now, and since this was shot in Thailand, I'm guessing he was easy to access.
Sure.
He was around. He's most famous for being one half of the climactic fight in the Jackie Chan movie Who Am I? He's the tall white guy who couldn't kick fast enough, so Jackie Chan got mad at him on the set. Tiger Chen.
Keanu's friend.
Yeah, Keanu's good friend, Tiger Chen, who Keanu, I like to say, basically gifted an entire film, Man of Tai Chi, to date the only film Keanu Reeves has ever directed, seemingly just to give this man, Tiger Chen, a leading role for the first time, and I would say maybe the last, but I guess he parlayed that into doing some movies in China.
Okay.
He's not a leading man. I describe him as a charisma vacuum. We will get to that later, but Tiger Chen is in there. He hits some people. End of story. Michael Bisping, former UFC middleweight champion, who is just happy to be working. He is just so goddamn pleased to be employed and in Thailand and having a grand old time. Michael Bisping cracks me up because during his tenure in the UFC, he was good, he was popular, but when he finally got the title, he milked that shit for all it was worth. Because the way he won the title against Luke Rockhold was in like the flukiest of fashions, where I think it was taken on short notice. He was not expected to do well, and he just knocked the guy out. He caught him.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he had that belt, he was like, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to get into pictures. Like, I'm going to do interviews all over the world. He just like, he must have a great agent or something, or a great manager. Because I think he filmed this around the same time he did Triple X3.
Yeah, that was a thing, wasn't it?
I only saw it because Donnie Yen and Tony Jaa.
You saw it.
I did see it. Like I said, I obsess about these kinds of movies. But in addition to Michael Bisping, we also have Jeeja Yanin. I don't know if I said that right, but she's the Thai lady.
Okay.
Most famous for a movie called Chocolate and Raging Phoenix. She's a noteworthy like stunt talent in Thailand. I think she was like an understudy of Tony Jaa with like his group.
Okay.
And then up front before the movie started, we got this little featurette with the director Jesse Johnson and Dominique Vandenberg, who said nothing and just sat like a fucking samurai staring into my soul. Seriously, he sat there and the director introduced him. He didn't even acknowledge it. He didn't move. He was a stone fucking Buddha statue. Dominique Vandenberg, I know because my friend made me read this shitty book called, I think, The Iron Circle. And it's basically the Frank Dukes story,
Okay.
aka the Bloodsport guy story, which was revealed to be phony.
Yeah.
It's basically that, except it's a French Foreign Legion guy, and he goes to Okinawa to learn some martial art that doesn't have a Wikipedia entry, so I can't trust that it really exists. It's just about him like going all around the world punching people. And the mystique about him is that, yeah, he has this killer look where he's like bald and has a goatee and looks smoldery and spooky. He's like Steven Seagal, but short. And Belgian. No, Flemish or whatever. Claim to fame, he stood next to Leonardo DiCaprio before the fight that didn't happen in Gangs of New York. So you know when they're marching and the two gangs are approaching each other? He's like the guy standing next to Leonardo DiCaprio.
He has a very distinct look. I don't remember that scene at all, but I'm sure like he stands out in a crowd.
If I was arranging extras for a scene like that, I'd say, yeah, you get up front.
Yeah.
Like if I have 100 people, bring him up front because he does look interesting.
Yeah.
And he apparently has some sort of martial arts background. I don't know how legit it is. But him and Jesse Johnson have a very long history. Actually, funny story. I went to our local Best Buy multiple times looking for this fucking movie called Pit Fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically because around the time my friend had me read that book, it just so happened that this guy's film career was getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And he starred in this film called Pit Fighter that came out in like 2006, I think.
Right.
I had to go back to that fucking Best Buy like 3 times because, like, 1, they didn't know what I was talking about. 2, it didn't come out on the day that it was listed to come out. and 3, like, apparently it was just in the back for weeks and nobody bothered to put it out because apparently nobody expected it to sell. I finally got it. It kind of sucks. But fun trivia, Scott Adkins and Jesse Johnson were both involved in the production.
Okay.
Which brings us full circle. There are other people in the cast that I haven't mentioned. I guess we'll get to them, but
There's
like I said...
one very prominent one, actually.
You want to bring it up?
Who, Iko?
Fuck. Maybe the most talented person in the cast. I'm sorry, Iko. Iko Uwais is in this film.
Yeah, no, Iko's the only reason like this movie is worth like checking out because he's the only guy who's really kind of on the upswing to the American audience. Like all those other ones you mentioned have a particular audience, don't get me wrong, and they're certainly worth watching given the right thing. But Iko is a name that your casual American moviegoer should be aware of. For those of you who aren't aware of some of his films.
The first one I know of is Marental.
Yeah.
And then, of course, The Raid 1 and 2. All 3 of those share the same director. I always get this mixed up. It's Gareth Edwards and Gareth... I think it's Gareth Evans and Gareth Edwards.
Yeah.
One is the Godzilla 2014 guy, and one is the Raid guy. And I'm sorry I mixed those 2 up. It's one of those 2. Or some combination. Fuck, I'm sorry. But in addition to that, he also had The Night Comes For Us, which is on the Netflix. I used my 1 month of Netflix to watch that. It was worth my time, for sure, as it would be worth anyone's time who's remotely interested in martial arts or action cinema. And he was in fucking Star Wars.
He was in Star Wars, and he was also in the Wahlberg movie.
Mile 22, which they're trying to make into a franchise.
Yeah, which I haven't seen, but the fact that he was prominently featured in a fight sequence is kind of a big deal.
It's a huge deal. He's paired up with, the second highest paid actor in Hollywood, and Peter Berg is a pretty big name director.
He's a pretty big name director, and he's very known for making very patriotic American-centric kind of movies, so to feature an Indonesian actor...
A Muslim guy.
In a prominent role, kind of promoting his career along. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I think you phrased it very well, that he is on the upswing. He's maybe the one guy who concretely has an upward trajectory on his career right now.
Yeah, no, I would say of everyone, all the main characters in this movie and actors, it's not to say that they're done. Like, they've all have a decent body of work, but it is very comparable to The Expendables. This is kind of, you're not catching these guys in their prime years. You're catching them after they've established themselves, and it's not a cash grab. It's hey, we've got an opportunity where we can all work together on kind of an equal ground, and it'll be neat. It's kind of an acknowledgement to fans of these kind of not as big action movies. I would B-level, I guess you would call them, or
I mean, it feels like a slap in the face, but it's kind of accurate.
I don't think they would call it a slap in the face. It's just things that get released in overseas more often, or things that you kind of have to seek out. Like, you're not going to find them in the theater. You're not going to necessarily find them on Netflix. They're out there, though, and they have a following.
Absolutely.
And tons of them actually gain acclaim years later. Donnie Yen has a bunch of those, actually, where the movie came out, it did well, and then it's not until years later that people overseas in America finally realize it exists. They're like, oh, this is kind of neat.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those couple years there where a lot of my friends were telling me about Ip Man in 2012 or whatever, and it's been like 4 years since then, guy, but there's been a sequel even. It's like, if you were paying attention, you could have followed his career from the 80s. But it takes usually like that one big movie or something to put that person on the map. Because, I mean, to be fair, like Scott Adkins, and in fact, almost all these people, these are working actors.
Yes.
Everybody has a place. And to be able to make your living being an actor, like getting consistent work, that's quite an achievement.
Yeah.
That's something to aspire to. And Scott Adkins, you could argue his most prominent role, like his biggest role, is Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
In terms of the number of
exposure
eyes, the amount of exposure granted to him by a singular role in a film is more than likely Doctor Strange, where he said nothing and was unceremoniously murdered by a cape. But on the red box or the direct-to-video circuit or however you want to phrase it, he still has a consistent career where he's cranking shit out and he's putting in good work.
Yeah, absolutely. All of them. I mean, it's...
Michael Jai White's got Black Dynamite too, and I forget what it's called, but it's like it's a Western of some sort that they released a teaser for like a few months back. It looks kind of cool.
Yeah, no, and like guys like even Bisping, like you say, he's happy to be there, and it shows. But there's always going to be a market for... a muscular British fellow who looks like he's been in a few fights. Wade Barrett's parlayed a wrestling career into that. And in fact, Bisping's almost more accessible because the problem Wade Barrett has, he's actually too big.
Yeah,
it's way too obvious he's a giant human being, which you want that effect in the movies, but it can be bad if you're casting a Tom Cruise or whatever, where the guy's 5'2" and you're supposed to film a realistic fight scene with a guy who's 6'5" and 280 pounds of pure muscle. Like, Bisping actually has a good size, especially with these actors where the main characters in this particular film are all Southeast Asian. So, yeah, actually, it was good casting in that sense. He has some work to do, but...
He certainly does.
But there's a future there, I'm saying. Like, there will always be the Marine 6 or whatever, where you can cast an evil British buff guy and,
No, absolutely. You put a beret on him, give him a knife or something, give him a one-liner or two.
Yeah.
And then have him, get an Indiana Jones goon death where, like, something big falls on him or he gets, like, hit with a propeller blade or something.
Yeah,
I can totally see it. Him just being
Seriously.
the big tough dude.
Yeah.
And in fact, that actor that was in, like, 2/3, half... Fuck it. I keep forgetting there's 4 Indiana Jones movies. I like to pretend there's 3.
Don't forget about the aliens.
Yeah, but that guy made an entire career out of just being the heavy.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I think he was in The Big Man that I watched with Kyle not that long ago for our Irish Films Month, and he was also in, I think, Never Say Never Again, the James Bond movie. So this man has been killed by James Bond, Indiana Jones, and Liam Neeson. Give this man a medal. It's funny you mentioned Wade Barrett, though. I think his real name's Stu Bennett.
Okay.
I think it is.
I think you're right.
He's starting to carve out a niche for himself in these direct-to-video movies. He actually has one that came out very recently that I wanted to see. But he's worked with Scott Adkins before, and the whole time I was watching this movie, Triple Threat, I was thinking to myself, like, I kind of wish we had Wade Barrett instead of Bisping, because, like, Wade Barrett actually has some acting chops. Michael Bisping does have some work to do. He acquitted himself pretty well. My biggest complaint with his physical performance is that, he's an actual fighter.
Right.
Just being an actual fighter, an actual martial artist, does not necessarily translate 100% to good on-screen performances.
Well, and the type of fighting too. Anytime, like, a person who's cast from a mixed martial arts background, like, as a fan of action movies, in particular with martial arts, like, I don't get excited for it because it's a style that is ugly to watch. Like, it's meant for grappling and kind of
utilitarian.
Yeah, it's not designed to be pleasing to watch. You're not going to see Van Damme like spin kicks and things like that's why you sign up for these types of movies.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to kind of retrain somebody to like, how do we exaggerate these movements to make them seem, you know, unique and interesting or devastating rather than, you know, just straight punches and trying to tackle a guy.
Well, yeah,
which is
when you're training for real fighting, you're looking for compact and precise and clean, sharp.
Right.
Like, I rewatched Creed not that long ago. There's that one scene where Rocky's trying to teach Adonis Creed about the concept of throwing a punch and also expecting one in return.
Yeah.
So he has him like shadowboxing in front of a mirror and like showing him that like pretend that something's coming at you when you're going on the offensive. And for an actual mixed martial artist, that's kind of the mentality. So the idea of like winging your arm out to throw like a big haymaker or something, your muscle memory is telling you, don't do that. You've been slapped 1,000 times by your coach to not do that. Yeah. And yeah, it translated to a handful of instances where he has a couple of fights mostly with Tiger Chen in this fucking Tiger Chen. Why would you pair him up with Tiger Chen? I mean, in like wrestling terms, Tiger Chen is not the guy you pick to carry Michael Bisping.
Well, look, we're gonna make a lot of wrestling discussion. I mean, there's going to be a lot of comparisons to wrestling throughout this, but I would argue a guy like Bisping, I speak from no knowledge of it because I have no connection to this movie. I haven't interviewed anyone. I'm not a valued source on this, but most people coming from that background, I would argue, are stiff and tough to work with. And Tiger Chen coming from more of like a coordinator background and also being the lesser known of the main three is willing to take those bumps a bit more.
This is true.
Because that's the whole thing. Like Bisping is substantially larger than Iko and Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen. And he can do some serious damage if he lands a blow. And the only way you're going to film these types of movies and make them look realistic, you're going to take some bumps.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm pretty certain that's why Tiger Chen got paired up with him most of the time was worst case scenario, if this guy breaks his jaw, we can film around it because nobody's signing up to see Tiger Chen. But, I mean, it's true. But
I mean, we'll get to that. But I get what you're saying, and I'm being hyperbolic. Like, truthfully, what I know of the man, Tiger Chen, that does seem to be the case. Because the reason why Man of Tai Chi got made is because when Keanu Reeves did the Matrix movies, in particular the second two, I mean, for all of those movies, all the actors went through I think 9 months of martial arts training. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I remember reading that he and Tiger Chen were buddies on the set and would hang out after hours just like training. Yeah. So it was like him paying him back basically. And so if he can teach Keanu Reeves like the basics of Kung Fu and Tai Chi and things like that, he seems like a patient guy who could probably put up with a non-screen fighter and show them the ropes. I mean, at the end of this movie, Bisping even says this is my first movie. Yeah. So I guess he did have a lot to learn, and having like an actual instructor, somebody with the patience to actually go through the steps with him was probably a good idea.
And tied to, I'm pretty sure what you were alluding to, but anytime you can have a Chinese fighter beat up on a British guy, that's a huge pop for a particular audience that has a lot of money. You want to sell some
tickets in China, you bring out a Brit, you have him get cracked in the face.
Let's jump into this movie, because that's a big theme that I want to kind of go back to throughout the course of this movie, of kind of who was this movie made for? So I think that carries throughout this whole entire film. So It starts off with, the wealthy Chinese heiress, who inherits her family's fortune. Like, apparently she's 30 under 30, rich, multi-billionaire. Yeah. And she was born in, was it a fictional country? I couldn't tell if... thought it was...
It's a fictional country.
Okay, it's a fictional country. It seems to be right in that heart of like Thailand and Myanmar and Cambodia. So a tiny fictional country, the name of which eludes me.
I think it's Mahajaya.
That sounds about right.
It's some gibberish name, but it's obviously shot in Thailand. But
yes,
they refer to it as Mahajaya throughout the entire film.
Yeah, so it's southeastern tiny nation, very poor, overrun by gangs, essentially. Or
syndicate.
Yeah, syndicate.
The repetition got to me.
Yeah, it's not military, which is important distinction.
Yeah, very
actually.
important, especially when we're talking about Thailand.
Yes. So it's criminal syndicates kind of run this tiny little country. This billionaire heiress decides that she's going to donate her fortune to cleaning this all up, bringing education to the people. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that was my reaction.
It's a cool concept, don't get me wrong. It's very confusing in the era we live in, where it seems like anyone with money is just amassing more money by the second. But hey, do you?
Yeah.
So anyway, so she's coming to town. She gets established with her bodyguard. She's doing her press tour.
Yeah, I believe we start with like some news footage, just talking heads talking about the situation in Mahajaya, how it's like, oh, crime syndicates are up to no good, but this lady's going to clean up the town.
Mm-hmm.
This lady, Selena Jade is the name of the actress. I know her from a couple of Chinese movies, most prominently Wolf Warrior 2.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
Yeah, that one. The one that made, like, all the money. And the thing that jumped out to me right away, and this carries, again, throughout the entire film, is that everything that the talking heads on the news are talking about is crimes committed against the Chinese communities of Mahajaya. Not like they're very specific. Like they're not just talking about the country as a whole. It's like specifically the Chinese communities of this small Southeast Asian country.
Yeah, and if I recall, it actually isn't revealed until much later that she was actually born in this country, and she was only born there. She was born to Chinese parents, so in the beginning, it really is just Chinese billionaire saving tiny Southeast Asian
magnanimous country. Chinese heiress saves Thailand. The end.
literally, that's the beginning of this film.
Yeah.
So it kicks off that she's going to do it. She's on the phone a lot.
There's a lot of phone conversations in this movie that if you cut out all the phone conversations, this movie would be roughly 20% better.
Yeah, and you alluded to after the movie finished, and I agree with you. It's an ensemble movie. Absolutely. Anytime you're dealing with an ensemble movie, you're dealing with tough restrictions on scheduling, especially in a martial arts centered one, because you can't do the Marvel thing where you have a green screen, so you can kind of work around, maybe not having somebody present for a period of time.
I've been saying that for a while, that Captain America Civil War in particular, probably 2/3 of the characters featured in that scene are CGI.
Yeah.
Which would mean, half of those people don't even have to be on there.
Oh, no, huge, rant for a completely different podcast, but I would argue that was kind of the purpose all along of this Infinity War thing, was to kind of establish it where you can maintain a lot of A-list actors without having to really take up more than maybe a day's worth of their time to film an entire movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can create an ensemble situation where most of it's done in the green screen, and really they only need to show up for a little sound booth time and a few sequences of, live film.
Yeah. Iron Man headcam footage.
Like, no joke. Like, that's a way that you... But, again, it's a rant for another time, but seriously, that's how you retain an actor like Robert Downey Jr. long beyond, his main contract of being with Marvel for X amount of movies. Like, you can have him conceivably for the rest of his whole entire film career, as long as you're giving him freedom to do whatever the hell else he wants.
Yeah.
Moving aside, though, yeah. So there's a lot of these phone conversations. A lot of them seem interspersed just to kind of move the plot along, because they probably ran into some situations where it's like, how are we going to get these guys from point A to point B? I know so-and-so calls this person. Or anyway, bunch of phone calls. All of a sudden now we're in a commando unit in the heart of the jungle.
Yeah, and we get some really shitty looking fonts. Like I feel like they're aiming for like a Predator vibe with the fonts, because it has that edge to it, but it's just, they didn't pony up the cash for the good fonts. I know it's very tempting to go to the Da font or 1001 free fonts and get the free one instead. There were a couple of things in here where it's like, I think this was budget related. But yeah, we're traipsing through the jungle. We have our commando unit. It seems like Michael Jai White's mostly in charge at this point.
Yes.
And they have a couple of local trackers leading them through the jungle because their GPS and stuff doesn't seem to work because they're too deep in it. The trackers, of course, being Tiger Chen and Tony Jaa.
Yes.
And they come to a compound. I think there's some on-screen titles in this movie to give us an idea of where we're located. I think it said like MI6 spy headquarters or something. It's some sort of encampment, but the point is it's like British Secret Service.
Yes. And
they're in the jungle in Southeast Asia. And then we get kind of a recreation of that scene in Predator minus Arnold picking up a truck.
It reminded me a lot.
It was very Predator. Similar. In fact, you swap Poncho out for a tiny Thai woman with a grenade launcher, and same difference.
Yeah.
Very, very, very loud in the theater we were in. That grenade launcher was starting to. That grenade launcher was starting to get on my nerves pretty bad at some point. But yeah, this whole sequence here is mostly the commandos shooting people. We got Ron Smoorenburg with the pig with the M60 mowing people down. Jeeja Yanin with an M203 or something, like grenade launcher. Michael Jai White's doing stuff. You and I both had the same concerns earlier in this film, where it's like, he's not doing a lot. Like, is he going to be the designated driver in this movie? Like, there was a genuine fear that Michael Jai White was going to phone it in or something.
It was a bizarre sequence, and again, like I said, the constant recurring theme throughout this movie that I kept going back to is, who is this movie made for? Because you have Tiger Chen and Tony Jaa, your two main characters, in the marquee, like, you know, on the poster that was not present in the theater. It should have been these two prominently featured with Iko front and center. But the way this opening goes, where it's supposed to be this badass, like, beginning action sequence, kind of set the tone. It's very difficult to really even locate them. And it's not just because they're both, like, tiny guys, like, dressed up in all this, like, camo and things like that, but just there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of gunfire, like, it doesn't really introduce them at all, like, and if you're just kind of a casual movie fan, like, you're not going to pick up that these are your main characters.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. Like, to a casual Western viewer, you would, of course, think Michael Jai White, because he's the guy who seems like he's in charge.
Yeah.
And even Michael Bisping, he has some back and forth with him.
Well, and they both stand out.
Yeah.
Or even the guy with the pig you had mentioned, like, he has glasses, like, he's distinctive. But it's very, very difficult to kind of visually locate Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen, just because they both have, like, face paint on. They both spend most of it kind of sneaking around.
Yeah, and
like,
they look like they're the help, too.
Yeah. And
they look like they're there to die. Like, they look like red shirts or something.
Yeah, and even the girl shooting off grenades everywhere, like, she stands out much more than these two. Like, she has a neat haircut. She has a cool weapon. Like, she's doing much more. These two guys, they're very much kind of just cast to the side. Mm-hmm. So it very throws you off a lot. Like, they needed to have, I think, a dialogue sequence at least between the two of them, or show them to be a bit more competent than just, because the tracking sequences were very bare bones.
Yeah, it was very quick.
It was very much just kind of like Michael Jai White acknowledging that, these guys know what they're doing.
Yeah, and Tony Jaa sniffing some poop. And
it wasn't at all like a sequence suggesting that these guys are like primo, top of their class, like
if
commandos.
If you didn't know who Tony Jaa was,
right,
you would have no idea that he's going to be the main character in this film going forward. Mm-hmm. First major plot development, at least in terms of characters and stuff, comes in the form of Iko Uwais having his wife get shot in front of him. It was
pretty brutal.
It was pretty brutal. It was pretty shocking. He was well cast for this role. Not well utilized, but for this character, I actually like what they did with the titular triple threat. Mm-hmm. Where in terms of characterization, the people they picked to fill those roles was correct.
Yes.
Where it's like Iko Uwais is the fiery, just passionate, just emotionally charged one. Mm-hmm. Tiger Chen is just there. He's there to speak Chinese to the Chinese woman. And Tony Jaa is the charisma.
Yes.
Like, he's the guy...
Comedic relief and charisma.
Yeah, he's the guy that... We'll get to it later, but he's the guy that should probably have either died or gotten his shit wrecked at the end so Iko could step in and get his passion out.
Yes.
Because Tony's the one you actually care about because you know him. He's the movie star.
Yes.
And he's got the funny hair and he's got the fun Thai lisp and he's magnetic. Like, I really enjoyed him in this.
Yes.
Like, especially actually when he was speaking English. He's very endearing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Iko Uwais is apparently like a mercenary bodyguard or something. Like, he's on...
The whole unit. Everyone they're taking out, basically.
Yeah.
It's all hired help
Yeah.
I think he was Australian, but he's working for the British, or it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
But, a white guy leading a rogue commando unit somewhere in the heart of the jungle of Southeast Asia. So anyway, they are busting up this whole unit. Iko's there with his wife. He's the only one that has a wife with him.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah, everyone else is just a generic gun for hire. She gets brutally killed right in front of him.
Yeah.
He
gets shot in the shoulder.
He does,
and
yes.
they did some decent continuity with that a little bit, like 2 scenes later.
You're right.
And the first highlight of the film comes in the form of him and Tony Jaa running across one another during this fight. And it's revealed later that Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen were not planning to discharge their weapons because they thought they were on some humanitarian mission.
Mm-hmm.
This is told to us like an hour later. But point is, Tony Jaa sees him and doesn't shoot him right away, and they throw down, and it's a nice little scrap. It's pretty much what you'd want from both of them, although all too brief.
Yes. And again, a wasted opportunity if you're looking at it from appealing to a wider audience, in that it's not immediately clear who Tony Jaa is to your casual fan. If you're a fan of his work, of course, you pick up on it right away. And that plot point you brought up of them not discharging their weapons, it is apparent looking back on it, like, because everybody they take out, they just kind of subdue.
Yeah.
Versus everyone else is just getting blown to shit or mowed down. I think they could have done a better job of actually having Tiger Chen and Tony Jaa actually infiltrate the place first, and maybe making it look like they could have done the whole thing stealthily and just basically allowed this unit to just walk in, grab their target, and leave.
See,
that's what's confusing about it, because it just turns into a bloodbath immediately, and it's interspersed with these two guys kind of knocking people out throughout it, but you just assume they're going along with the action. And so even when he confronts Iko, like, you kind of want Tony Jaa to lose in this instance, because Iko's the guy who deserves to, avenge his wife.
Yeah.
Tony Jaa is just a generic soldier for hire who's out murdering people in the middle of the jungle for no reason, apparently.
Yeah, now that you mention it, that would have been a better way to go about the blocking of that scene. I think what the plan was, and I don't think it translated very well in the finished product we got, it was to have a retroactive reveal, because I think the way they went about it was when we get to freeing the prisoners a little bit later, we actually cut back to that when Tony Jaa is retelling the tale, and we show his reaction being like in the negative, like, what are we doing? Like, why is everybody dead? But I think it would have been wiser to do it just straightforward, like have them infiltrate and then have somebody of the commandos fuck up, and then it turns into a bloodbath where it's like, well, gotta do a whole village now, and then have Tony and Tiger, like Tony the Tiger, have the two of them running around the camp like shooting each other looks like, what the fuck is happening?
I think that's what was missing, because I think that would have added a human level, and I think it would have elevated the fight with Iko and Tony, where you kind of just want to see what happens, but you kind of want to see both of them win, which I think is a really neat thing that occurs in good martial arts movies, where you kind of were pulling for both, just when it's, especially when you're dealing with talents of this level.
Yeah.
So regardless, they wipe out the base, they take out everyone, they get to their target, which is Collins, which is Scott Adkins.
Yep. In his Captain Caveman outfit.
Wearing the worst wig ever.
Yeah,
and
the worst fright wig you've ever
covered
seen.
in shit with bright pearly white teeth.
Yeah. Like, seriously, completely spotless white teeth.
Like, amazing teeth.
Amazing teeth. Blindingly white.
Yes. Covered in shit. Worst wig ever.
Still got them abs, though.
Yeah, no, ripped to shit.
Had enough time to grow out that
Clean
hair.
Underwear.
Clean underwear, yeah.
Yeah, pops out of this cage. You know, both Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen were trying to release. There's a number of prisoners, again, that look like they're from the region, Southeast, you know, Myanmar, Thai, whatever. They try to pull them out. The commandos are having nothing to do with it. They release Collins, who first thing he does is chokes out the British spook in charge of this operation. And then
I think we leave the camp. Big explosion. I remember because my ears were ringing, and we get it twice in the movie.
Yeah,
because I mean, you got to pay. If you're gonna pay the money for the explosion, one, you got to make sure you have a drone. Because this is a low-budget film, and, you know, cranes are expensive, but we got drones. And two, you got to find a way to edit it in there twice. Call back to it. I paid, damn it. And then I think we cut to Iko being just crestfallen that his wife is dead. He's an emotional wreck. Brief montage of him digging graves for all of his buddies, all of his comrades in the camp, and he makes some sort of resolution with his wife that I'm going to seek revenge with my bare hands. And I think we cut to some talking heads because we need more of that.
Yeah,
like more threats to the Chinese community in Mahajaya. And I think we very quickly cut to the fighting arena.
Yes.
It happens pretty suddenly. This was a scene that was featured in like the teaser trailers for the movie, and I didn't expect it to occur so early. But basically, Iko tracks down some of the commandos to some populated area, like a town or a city or something, and he gets a tip from somebody on the street that they're in there, and it just so happens to be like an underground fighting arena, because
why not?
I mean, it's a martial arts movie. There's got to be some sort of fighting arena of some sort. And inside, I believe Tony Jaa is getting ready for a match against, like, some large Thai gentleman, I want to say. He reminded me of, like, the Great Khali but from wrestling, but, like, a foot shorter and probably equally fast.
Yeah, he's playing kind of the immovable object kind of opponent where, you know, he's incredibly large, incredibly powerful.
I think that's what they were going for, but like the way he was framed, he didn't look that big.
No, the way they framed him, he looked like a sad old man.
Yeah, he looked like he was having trouble getting around.
Yeah, it was very confusing because clearly once the fight begins, you're supposed to feel like this is a very intimidating opponent.
Yeah, the build up to it is long.
But the framing of it, yeah, he really does look like a confused old man.
Yeah, it's a little sad, especially since Tony Jaa's still got it for sure.
Yeah,
and he's like running circles around the guy, but like the beats and the choreography, I get, like, if you were playing like a fighting game or something, it'd be like one punch from this guy like takes half of your health or something. It's like, that is just unfair. That's like King of Fighters end boss unfair. That's like Geese Howard unfair. But yeah, like this guy lands a couple of hits on Tony, and the way the choreography is plotted out, it's like, oh my god, he's in danger. It's like, no, he's not. He's fine. Yeah, he hasn't even gotten the elbows or the knees going.
Right before the fight kicks off, actually, too, there's this brief moment of Tiger Chen placing a bet on Tony Jaa. And here's... Tiger Chen has one of the worst haircuts imaginable in this movie. Like,
I was waiting to see when this would come up.
It's just the dweebiest hairstyle, and I'm sure maybe it's popular in certain parts of the world. I'm not that cultured, but...
Yeah.
All I know is it makes him look like a small boy.
It does. It really does.
And it's a very confusing sequence because I'm not as familiar with Tiger Chen. So he's a little guy. He's placing this bet. And really the way he's kind of introduced, he seems like he's going to be the buddy of Tony Jaa who gets murdered and motivates him. Like the little friend who's kind of like undersized. And like, it took me a minute to realize, no, wait, this is one of our main action stars here.
Yeah, I could totally see you nudging someone in the theater and be like, he's not going to be in the whole thing, is he?
Yeah, because he really just does look like a small little child, like in this arena. So anyway, Tony Jaa ends up knocking out the monstro or whatever. And
El Gigante.
Iko goes up to the bookkeeper and demands that he be entered in this tournament. So Tony Jaa gets out, he sees Tiger with the money. Next thing you know, Iko's in the arena about to fight Tiger Chen. I was like, holy shit, this guy fights? Like, because again, it was like the way it was presented, like generally in the martial arts movies I grew up with, the Van Dammes or whatnot, there usually was kind of like the diminutive guy that either gets broken or killed or captured. A lot of time they get captured because they're just meek and like, you know.
It's Apollo and Rocky 4. You got to motivate the hero somehow, or like Jackson in Bloodsport. You got to someone's got to get their head stepped on, you know, to get Tony angry so he can go Super Saiyan.
But it really threw me for a loop. Realized, oh, that's Tiger Chen, and he's about to fight Iko, and we just saw him, you know, Iko fight Tony, so that makes sense. But again, it's just a poor introduction to these characters.
Yeah.
Which again speaks to, like, who are you making this movie for? Because me as an American who's not as familiar with their backgrounds, I don't immediately connect with these characters. Like, it's much, much easier for me to see a Michael Jai White on film and kind of have a general idea of what he's going to present. He's a bigger dude. He's kind of gruff in this movie. It's like, okay, I know what his character is. These two guys are introduced as trackers that aren't really ever presented on front and center on the film and just kind of like appear, and now all of a sudden they're in the middle of a fighting arena and are supposed to be really competent at what they do. Really confusing.
Yeah, well, we've been tiptoeing around it a little bit. But a big thing about this movie, and basically the reason Tiger Chen seems to be in it, is supposedly this entire concept, this entire project only came together because Tiger Chen got the ball rolling. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much he had to do with actually organizing it, but apparently it came from like an on-set discussion between him and Iko Uwais. Mm-hmm. Because, believe it or not, Iko was in Man of Tai Chi.
Oh, really?
I think around the time like the first Raid movie was out, so not even the second one. He was barely on anyone's radar in the West. And the funniest thing about that movie is that it's a decent little martial arts movie. I would say that the best fight happens in the first half hour of it, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Iko is built up to be like this big final boss character. It's actually Keanu. But in the film, Tiger Chen's character is going through like an arc, and by the time he gets to Iko's character, he's deciding he doesn't want to fight anymore. So what we get is Iko Uwais chasing him for like 2 minutes, and them having no contact with each other is the biggest fucking letdown. And I think they had one of those on-set discussions where it's like, someday we'll do this again, we'll do it right.
Yeah.
And supposedly that's where the seeds for Triple Threat came from, was them, and maybe even Keanu being like, yeah, that's a good idea, we should do that.
And see, that kind of speaks to my point of saying, like, who's this made for? Because, like, Man of Tai Chi with Keanu, that he directed it.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, the American trailers for it very distinctly made it clear he was the final boss character.
Yeah.
But I'm sure for international trailers, it was probably framed more for, like, I'm sure especially for the Indonesian audience, Iko was probably front and center, because they're going to go into it saying, like, holy crap, this guy's...
The biggest example I always use is the G.I. Joe movies.
Yes.
Where Lee Byung-hyun is in 10 minutes of both of those movies.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Asian marketing, like, in big quotes, Asia, not just Korea, all of Asia.
Right.
He is featured so prominently in all the trailers because he's the bankable star for that target audience. And for Triple Threat, I don't know if there were reshoots after the fact, but this film seems to be largely targeted at Chinese audiences. Mm-hmm. One, the crimes against the Chinese community, and the central plot being about, you know, billionaire Chinese heiress saving all of Southeast Asia. That's pretty pro-China. But then on top of that, we have these loose, lingering plot threads in the background about the Chinese embassy, like, being the answer to all the problems, and, like, come to the embassy, we'll take care of you. And on top of that, you have Tiger Chen and Selena Jade having the majority of the hero's dialogue. Mm-hmm. So Tony Jaa might be the face of the production. Like, he's the most recognizable star, maybe even above Iko Uwais at this point. but the majority of the actual dialogue and plot development concerns two Chinese people in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
And then Michael Wong makes an appearance in this film. I told you after the screening that you recognize Michael Wong from a certain Transformers movie that we watched. I know him from Hong Kong films. He's arguably a good actor. He's been in very, very good movies. He's never the best part of them. But in Transformers 4, there's that sequence that takes place in Hong Kong, and he shows up for one shot just to say, we need to notify the central government. And in this film, he is man on telephone with guns.
Yes.
He's just there to be a Chinese celebrity in a film targeted at Chinese audiences, from what I can tell. And from what little research I did about the film before watching it, apparently a lot of the financing came from Chinese production companies as well. And that was evidenced by the multitude of Chinese production banners before the film started. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty obvious who the central target audience of it is. However, my suspicion is that wasn't the case when they got started.
Yes.
I think it happened halfway through production, where it's like, shit, now we need money for distribution, and nobody wants to front the bill. It's like, how do we take what we shot and make it work for somebody?
Well, in being a movie, I will say it doesn't come across at all like a troubled production, which is big. I think it actually flows pretty well. Yeah,
Jesse V. Johnson is a competent director.
Yeah, no,
I own a few of his films. He's pretty good, and there's a reason why Scott Adkins has been working consistently with him for half dozen movies now.
Yeah, no, it's given everything we're discussing, and I'm sure all of that was prevalent throughout it. He did a pretty good job of slapping certain things together to continue the flow of the basic movie.
Yeah.
So Tiger fights Iko at this point. What did you think of the fight?
It was all right. Tiger. I refer to him as a charisma vacuum, both in terms of his acting ability and, believe it or not, in terms of his martial arts performances. Because you can tell he's a very well coordinated martial artist. Most famously doing Tai Chi, probably some form of Kung Fu as well, or Bagua or something. He's graceful, but he's not powerful. Whereas Iko Uwais, his silat techniques, the reason why I think those techniques resonate with Western audiences in particular is the prevalence of MMA in Western culture right now. Reality is really big. It's a really big concept in fight choreography. Fight choreography comes in trends.
Well, I would say all action movies. I mean, we've elevated to a level. We grew up with the dumbass, the old man dad sitting on the couch be like, that's not how you shoot a gun.
Yeah.
That's not how you hold that.
Well,
and now everybody goes through military SWAT training. We've all seen Keanu Reeves on YouTube blowing up at the range. People know how to properly hold guns. People know how to properly put up their dukes.
The audience is more educated now, which is why I think wrestling audiences are smarks now, smart marks, where it's it used to be you believed in the product. Now it's you don't believe in the product. You know how it's made, but you buy into it anyway.
Right.
You're accepting the entertainment. But yeah, the audiences are more well educated. In the old days, you would hand an actor a gun and they use it as a prop, as a tool. And a lot of times you'd have cases where people will hold their gun sideways or
well, they were looking more to make it unique and stand out. And
they're using it as a prop to aid in their performance. Whereas nowadays you have on-set advisors who tell you, no, you tuck in your elbow and your shoulder and stuff like that, and this is how you do it right. You have to do it right now because there's too many people out there who know what it looks like.
Plus, there's a lot of money in hiring military advisors for these positions. You make a lot of money in the U.S. if you do pro-U.S. military fare in your feature.
I was not aware of that. Thank you, mysterious stranger who passed through the room just now. But yeah, in terms of fight choreography nowadays, everything moves in trends in the stunt world. And it's really fascinating to see it evolve. Right now we're at this reality stage where in the old days you would stack your hits. So you take advantage of the framing of the camera and you do these barroom brawl swings and just have the person whip their head around. And because of the camera angle, it looks real. Nowadays, though, people seem to be pushing the envelope and aiming for as much contact as possible.
Yes.
And Iko Uwais is also a choreographer. He didn't choreograph this film, but his style of choreography often involves a lot of limb strikes and a lot of chest hits.
Yes.
And I think a big reason for that is that it's safe. Is that you can have a flurry of strikes actually make contact with your opponent's chest, and there's no camera trickery, there's no false angles. You actually see the impact, and the audience can't deny that happened.
Well, and I would argue that Iko's biggest strength as a martial artist, and I speak from it being completely ignorant. Like, I've seen the big ones, what I'll say is that I think his biggest strength is he shows his bumps. Like, look, when you're in the course of the action, we've all seen like the big budget shit.
Yeah.
Like, take Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Like, there's sequences where Chris Evans is going at it with Bucky Barnes, and they're doing their thing, and it's two guys, the two real actors doing it.
Yeah.
And it's been telegraphed to where they know where to move their head and all, and there's some contact, but it's a lot of blocking, a lot of redirection. Iko is one of the few guys who knows how to take a blow and show that it affected him in the course of doing everything I just listed off.
Yeah.
Most everyone else are so focused on not fucking up the hand gestures that they don't accidentally haul off and pop the guy in the mouth, that they're kind of stiff.
Yeah, it's true, and even among the world's most prominent screen fighters, I guess you'd call them, like Donnie Yen, for instance, he doesn't take his own bumps. He has a stunt double.
That's what I was going to say with Tiger Chen. That's what stood out the most in this fight with Iko, is that Tiger Chen, the whole time he's doing his thing, and he's talented, very talented, going out with Iko. But every time Iko takes a blow, you can see it visually affecting him.
He's also a very good actor.
And that's
underrated.
No, that's why I was going to say he's definitely on the upswing, because if he can improve his English, he's actually has a very, very
charismatic,
viable career ahead of him.
He's very charismatic, and he does sell emotion very well.
Yeah, and he can, don't get me wrong, he can have a career if he doesn't improve his English, but I'm saying he could be a Hollywood borderline Hollywood action star if he could speak a little better English, because that's the one thing holding him back otherwise, because he's got everything else down.
Yeah, and what you're saying about him showing his bumps, actually it's kind of funny. I've always said that's Scott Adkins' biggest asset. We haven't gotten to him just yet. He's unfortunately relegated to mostly the finale of the movie, but Scott Adkins, started out, I think, as just a goon in a Jackie Chan movie. And then he worked his way up and up and up and up. And when you start, it's again, the path of a wrestler. It's you got to be the jobber. And if you can sell as a jobber, then it builds this skill set for you that can translate into so many better things. And because he came from those humble beginnings, because he wasn't Steven Seagal, because he wasn't given the leading man role to begin with, he's very good at selling in addition to dishing shit out. So he's a good performer, but he's also good at being on the receiving end.
Well, and I would argue too, again, it's very similar to wrestling, but it's what's fascinating about critiquing something like a martial arts movie, which, yes, it's been along forever. There's famous Chinese cinema from back in the day, but it really the total Hollywood vision of it is a pretty modern thing, and we kind of grew up with the first moments of that. That kind of was what Bloodsport was. That kind of was what all these kind of the Chuck Norris bullshit, the Steven Seagal stuff. That was kind of how do we implement this thing that's been popular overseas and bring it to a new audience and make money off it. Because at the end of the day, that's part of why these movies are being made.
Well, yeah.
Because we can't all cast Arnold. Really, that's what it was. We all want Arnold, this big, massive block of a human being, but we tried finding other guys. They're terrible actors. We tried finding or charisma vacuums, but I'm able to find these other guys who can do all these really impressive athletics. So that was kind of the first generation of it. Now we're starting to see actually guys who grew up seeing all these movies, aspiring to it, like Scott Adkins, perfect example, wanted to be like a Van Damme, but grew up watching that and understands the background to it, and so has more of an appreciation for all the guys who took the bumps that helped put Van Damme over, and is more willing to be that guy rather than just wanting to be the star. Because that's what attracted the Seagals and the Van Dammes. they were just, athletes or martial artists or whomever who just wanted to be in the spotlight. Now you're seeing people who know it's the craft of making a martial arts movie is the high point of what they're trying to accomplish, and that is what's neat about this movie, and that was the ultimate goal, was these are all people, this is their life.
Yeah, these are guys who not only are martial artists, but also actors and screen fighters.
Yeah.
Because there's a major difference, and I think that's where the skill set comes from. Is guys like Scott Adkins, who grew up watching all the same movies we did, grow up with an understanding of not only the martial art itself, but how it translates to film.
Yes.
And how to make it look good in addition to being effective.
Yes.
And again, that's a major asset in Scott Adkins' toolkit, is that he knows his angles. Like, he knows his good side. He knows where to place his punches for maximum impact. Not for practicality, but just because it looks fucking awesome. But yeah, this little skirmish between Tiger Chen and Iko Uwais was pretty satisfying. Iko definitely is the more charismatic performer, but Tiger definitely keeps up with him. There's not a speed or precision discrepancy between the two. They definitely are decent dance partners.
I think it stands out too that there's a few brief moments where Tiger kind of makes it clear in demonstrating that the style of martial arts he's using is different. It's very rooted in traditional Chinese kind of.
And that was kind of the concept of Man of Tai Chi as well. That Tai Chi is generally not thought of as an effective, offensive martial art. And there's a Jet Li movie called, I think, Tai Chi Master that, kind of exists for a similar reason, although that's, plagued with some of the most egregious wire work you'll ever see. It's an entertaining movie, but it's one of those movies where it's can we not fly for a second? It's a cultural thing.
I was going to say with Tiger, it actually makes it apparent. It improves his character from what I originally perceived him as the dorky guy who gets either murdered or captured or whatever. It's actually, oh no, he's a viable figure. He just practices different art, and he's a different,
His character is that he's the stoic one. He's centered. He's calm. So Iko obviously is coming at him with raw emotion, is swinging a bit wild. He does a good job with his facial acting, showing that he's not a happy camper right now.
Yeah.
In fact, there's that trailer moment where he's got Tiger by the throat and he's like, "Do you remember me? You killed my wife. For that, I will kill you." It was very Princess Bride.
Yes.
It was very Inigo Montoya. But the key thing to note coming into this fight is that Iko does in fact have a bullet in his shoulder.
Yes.
And they do a good job of drawing attention to it in the blocking of the scene. And end result, Tiger knocks him out.
Yes.
And then he wakes up in Tiger and Tony's apartment or whatever. And it's the most casual hangout imaginable. It's
they're cooking dinner, they're getting drunk.
They looked like they're having a grand old time. I kind of wish I was there. Seriously, he's just laying in bed on the floor and Tony's cooking. They got liquor out. And with very little explanation. Tony basically says "Oh, we didn't kill those people." And Iko's like, "Okay, I believe you. Let's get drunk." End scene. So basically that whole scene exists to show that the triple threat has formed.
Yes.
These three Asian fellas, I guess, just came to an understanding. This is a very common thing in martial arts movies. We come to learn and know each other as people by punching each other. Healing fists.
Yeah, so Iko gets them drunk.
Yeah, and I thought it was going somewhere, but only a little bit.
Yeah. Iko gets them drunk. They both wake up. Iko's no longer there. They realize that he set them up. Yeah,
cops come. And this is where I started forming the running gag in my own mind, where it's oh, just tell them you're Tony Jaa. They'll leave you alone. I would have loved to have seen that. The cops kick the door down. They're just, oh, sorry, Mr. Jaa. You have a nice day. Sign my autograph, please.
So they get arrested by the police.
Yeah.
Then we find out that the Chinese heiress is making a television appearance to explain her plan for how she's going to save this country with her billions of dollars.
Yeah. She sits down to an interview with not Forrest Whitaker. Yeah. I swear, I was like, is that Forrest Whitaker?
Yeah.
He looked a lot like him, but it wasn't him.
No.
But yeah, she sits down to like some sort of international interview of some sort in a hotel. She basically tells you everything that Matt told you earlier in the podcast, that like almost verbatim, like, I plan to give this money to the community so they can make jobs for yada yada yada.
Yeah, and meanwhile it's interspersed with cuts of a mysterious woman on the phone with Collins, Scott Adkins' character.
Yeah, who's all cleaned up now, by the way.
Yeah, all cleaned up, looks like Scott Adkins. And yeah, basically, I forget exactly what she says. It's a very forgettable scene. This is one of those many sequences of people on the phone where you're just kind of like, can we hit people again?
Yeah, can we just get to some shooting or hitting or something?
And it's basically, yeah, she there's a plan, a conspiracy.
The syndicate.
Yes.
The crime syndicates in
right.
Mahajaya.
There's some sort of conspiracy, and, you know, Scott Adkins now leading the same commandos from earlier.
Yeah.
They go about and they are going to abduct the heiress,
the plan
or murder him. Was it abduct or murder?
It's very unclear, because by the end, Mr. Collins definitely wants to murder her.
I feel like it was in the movie they say murder, but it appears like they're trying to just capture her, because they do a very poor job of murder for people who murder for a living.
I mean, the way this operation plays out, basically she's walking down the steps out of the hotel. She's got a couple of bodyguards, one of which is this Chinese actress who may or may not be somebody, because the way she's framed, it looks like she is. Anyway, our commando unit, they pull up in like a van, and they've got Bane masks on, or no, Army of Two masks.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Sadly,
call back to a Xbox 360 reference there. And they just slide open the side panel and just open up with ordnance. It's like everything they've got, and this is at least a half dozen commandos just dumping rounds into the front of this hotel, and a couple people
they kill everybody but the frickin' Hoppa girl in high heels.
Yeah,
they literally wipe out everybody else, except for this girl in high heels standing in the middle of a staircase.
Yeah, it's like, if that's the best your aim can do, you got problems, guys.
Yeah, so the bodyguard gets winged in the arm and tells the heiress she needs to go to the police station.
Yeah, I'll hold them off.
Yeah.
Just you? And you go run. And she successfully runs.
So, yeah, she manages to escape on foot.
Yeah, on foot.
In high heels.
Yeah.
From this commando unit who can wipe out a whole army in the jungle. Yeah, no problem.
They've killed 2 armies at this point in the film.
And they just lit up this, what conceivably is the most expensive hotel in this entire country. But I digress. So, anyway, they realize she's making a break for the police station.
Yeah.
So they split up, right? Or is it they all go as one?
They split up, and then we get something that reeked of like a reshoot or an insert of some sort. I want to say insert.
Okay.
So I can't remember the name of it. I think it has an X in the title, because of course X. Jesse V. Johnson's next movie, so not the one coming out next. That would be Avengement, which just got a trailer release today. His next feature is starring Dominique Vandenberg.
Okay.
Which is why I think that behind the scenes thing featured him. The group splits up, and like Collins is directing traffic, saying, you guys come with me, you guys go that way. And then we cut to Dominique Vandenberg walking by himself, and he's like knifing some security guards while he's going after Selena Jade. And then there's really awkward shot where the bodyguard, the Chinese bodyguard lady, mows him down with an assault rifle, and he says, "Son of a bitch!"
That was hilarious.
In like Flemish or something. And he killed a couple people in the camp in the jungle, but that's it. That's the entirety of his role.
It's not even like, the way you describe, like, it's a picture of a massive human being walking through an open meadow with people clearly out to get him. And he's just walking up and stabbing a few cops along the way. And so clearly he gets blown away.
Yeah, I think maybe that that sequence was like a gift to Mr. Vandenberg, where it's like the director saying, "Hey, buddy, I didn't forget about you."
It could have been that, or they wanted to elevate this particular bodyguard who may be a popular actor in China.
Yeah,
or
that could be it.
There's a lot of different ways it could be.
It's like she needs to kill one of them.
It's very bizarre, though, for this unit that up until this point has just wiped out everything they've gotten near, and at this point has taken out all the perceived threats in the area.
Yeah.
And this dumbass just goes stomping through in the middle of, like, no cover, no nothing. I think he even takes off his protective mask.
Yeah, he takes off.
In fact, they all take off their protective masks, because then they decide they're going to go raid a police station.
Yeah!
Where Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen are being held captive.
Yeah, so the plan now is that now that we don't have the heiress, there's also another loose thread where it's like, oh shit, those two Asian tracker guys that we brought along for the ride, shit, they're in town and they're in this police station. And like, without skipping a beat, Scott Adkins, Collins, is like, yeah, let's just go to the police station and fuck them up.
This is when Michael Jai White, too, takes over as the driver, and this is where I thought he reached Bruce Willis level of Expendables. Like, I don't give a fuck at all about this production, because he wasn't moving at all. Like, for both these assault sequences, he's literally sitting behind the wheel of a car, not involved at all.
Yeah, I was getting worried, because I was like, he keeps driving around the back.
Yeah.
He's so like, you guys go do your thing. I gotta go make Black Dynamite too.
So then he pulls up to the police station, drops him off, and goes about his merry way. These guys all roll in with no masks on. The only foreigners apparently in this entire country, and barge into a police station with full auto guns after they just shot up the biggest hotel in the country.
Yeah.
And they shoot up the whole police station in pursuit of the heiress.
Yeah. Pretty big scene. It kind of got me thinking about like Terminator or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Arnold goes after Linda Hamilton.
It's not the worst sequence. Like it's actually pretty cool. Like it's well shot at gun battle. I'll say that.
It needs to be said the whole movie's shot pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Like the color grading also, like especially in like the jungle scenes, and there's a couple like firelit scenes and some neon lighting and a couple of bar scenes. There's some attention to detail. Whoever did the cinematography knew what they were doing.
Sure.
Police station, like the location's well utilized. Like the geography is very distinct and clear, and it's a decent set or location or whichever it was. Couple of deaths of semi-prominent figures in the scene. Funny note, when the cops are interrogating Tony Jaa, I was kind of cracking up a little bit because the way this scene plays out, like one of the cops is interrogating Tony Jaa, and he's hassling him, saying like, "Oh, you think you're a big man?" And then we keep cutting back to it, and there's more and more people in the room.
Yeah.
And the guy keeps threatening him, and by the end of it, there's like 8 guys standing over him. It's just like, what? Is this how things are done in Thailand? You just keep stuffing people in the room until the guy cracks or something? But yeah, big shootout happens. Selena Jade makes it to the police station, and she's having some difficulties communicating with the people from the place where she's born.
Yes.
Because she's Chinese and she can't be bothered to speak the brown people tongue. Cause
she wants to save them with her money.
Yeah, I'm just trying to save you with my money, but I didn't bother to learn your language. Yes. Sorry. I am going to completely flip your economy upside down overnight, but that's how it goes. Anyway, she gets to the police station. She can't communicate with anyone there. We get a fun comedic beat where her interview's on the TV and she's like pointing to it saying like, "See, that's me." And one of the Thai cops is like, or Mahajayan cops is like, "She's on TV." And I was expecting him to be like, "That can't be. Are you a witch or something?" But yeah, Jeeja Yanin shows up with Ron Smorenberg. Ron Smorenberg being the Dutch fellow with the pig. He and Tony Jaa have a little bit of a throwdown here. It's a decent little skirmish. He's getting up there in years, you can tell. But he acquits himself well. It's not as good as what we've seen earlier in the film between the more fresh performers, I guess. Couple of good beats here, though. Like I think he like Samoan drops Tony onto a table or something. That was pretty fun. And then I think the scene concludes with, and this is the first of a few instances, actually, with an anticlimactic end to the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a theory about this, but we'll get to it. So he and Tony are scrapping, and then Iko just kind of appears. He's got a handgun. I don't know where he got that from, but
Yeah.
And he shoots Ron Smorenberg in the back, and then Tony like does some sort of wheel kick that puts his face into the floor, and we get a neck crack sound. So it's implied that he just snapped his neck doing that. And it's like, oh, so Tony won the fight, but he had a little help. So like it's like in wrestling terms, it's like the guy comes in with the chair, and it's like, oh, The Rock didn't lose, he just got cheated. So it's like everybody looks strong now. It's like I know what you're doing. Stop it.
No, it's very true. It's the guy's wearing body armor, so he doesn't die from the shot, but it's enough to like wound him to allow that Tony.
But this is the first of a few instances in this movie where we're robbed of a clear-cut victory that is desperately needed.
Yes.
Especially with a person like Ron Smorenberg, who it's like, I doubt you knew who that was.
No.
I doubt most people know who that is. I only recognize him because he was in Tom Yong-goong and Who Am I? But this is exactly the reason why Steven Seagal has never been in an Expendables movie.
Right.
Because he wants to be booked strong. And in order to stand opposite Sylvester Stallone in Stallone's fucking movie, you have to let him punch you every once in a while. And Steven Seagal doesn't get punched. So I don't know if that was the case on this production, but it feels weird. We're robbed of like, moments because it's like, oh, well, that just kind of ended.
Yeah. I think there's part of that, and I think there's also the issue of they didn't want to overdo that kind of like David and Goliath thing. Because there's a very obvious size disparity with almost every fight with these commandos and our three protagonists.
Yeah.
And I think as a result of that, they didn't want it to be the constant, like, hey, the little guy wins in the end thing. Like, in this instance, it was kind of like, it's this behemoth of a man that the only way you were going to take him down, you do kind of have to have some assistance.
I guess.
But moving along, then, what is it? The gal with the...
Jeeja Yanin and Iko, I think. They square off.
Yeah, it was Iko, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Iko, and she kind of figures out pretty quickly that's like, like, I don't think at this point she's supposed to know who he is. What little characterization we get for her in this movie, Ron Smorenberg's characterization is like the fella in Rogue One, his goggles.
Yeah.
Her haircut, and she has a couple of moments with Michael Jai White where I guess it's suggested that there may be a couple or something, because he's looking out for her and they like flirt a little bit.
Yeah, he tells her she has to watch her back.
He's like, watch your ass, like I'm telling you, and then like she tries to take her gun away from him, and he's like, and they shoot each other some looks. It was kind of cute. They have a bit of a rapport.
She's also substantially younger, I think. So there's kind of suggested compared to the rest of the group. Yeah,
there's
it's kind of suggested that she's like the younger of the bunch.
Yeah, and she runs up with her fucking grenade launcher, and another theme that carries on to most of the fights in this movie is immediately disarmed. Because this is a martial arts movie. You can't have people shooting each other at the beginning of the fight. Very, very brief fight. A little bit disappointing because I know she's touted as being very talented. I haven't actually seen her movies, but I do know she is known in the stunt community. She gets the most violent death in the film.
Very satisfying.
It was pretty fucking satisfying. I think I heard a from your end of the theater.
Yeah.
Iko jacks her grenade launcher from her, and she's laying on the floor, like pinned up against the wall. And he just blasts her. And it's not a fiery explosion.
No, she explodes.
It is a gooey explosion. It's very tasty. I kind of liked it.
I thought it was hilarious.
It was a goo kind of moment.
Yeah, so then they escape the police station.
Yeah, now they have the girl with them.
Yes, they've taken out 2 commandos.
Yeah, is this the foot chase through the market?
Yes.
Extended foot chase through the market. At this point, I think it's Michael Bisping and Scott Adkins paired up with each other.
Yes, because Michael Jai White refuses to leave the comfort of the van.
He doesn't run, man. He needs his AC in his van. He's like, I think he tries to follow them in the van or something. But yeah, it's this brief little foot chase. The whole time I was thinking, like, I don't know if they choreographed this. I think they just ran around in Thailand and, like, all the cars stopping and almost running them over were probably just legit.
I'm pretty sure.
But I think the scene ends with them getting away. Scott Adkins is pissed. He has some zingers in this movie. They're actually quite funny.
Mm-hmm.
His acting has improved quite a bit. He's very charismatic. He has some good lines in here, one of which is him, like, yelling, like, fuck! And, like, Michael Bisping is, like, tired of taking his shit. And Scott Adkins has to lay it out to him. It's like, we're running around the streets of Mahajaya with assault rifles and tactical gear. There are people looking at us the whole time. This is not good. Michael Bisping's like, yes, you have a point. So the idea at this point is we need to get the guys, the trackers, and the girl, but at the same time we have to evade the authorities and stuff.
Right.
And I think Scott Adkins gets another phone call from Mystery Lady at this point. He's also getting calls from Michael Wong. The back of Michael Wong's head, by the way.
It's also very confusing because at this point he's like kind of like he breaks off like briefly to pursue on foot on his own, and lets the other two get in the van.
Yeah, he's like, Michael Bisping, get in the van. Michael Jai White's getting lonely.
And again, he's still running around with full weapons and stuff in the middle of this crowded marketplace.
Yeah,
very distinctive. Like it's confusing, but what it leads to is him encountering Iko. Iko at this point, kind of lays like, I'm going to help you find these guys.
Yeah. He's like, I want what you want. I've been tracing these guys for a long time. I can help you find them. And he manages to win him over, and we start to get this like Yojimbo kind of vibe a bit, where he's like trying to play both sides or something. Yeah,
which made more sense the beginning with the brutal killing of his wife, I'd say, because it really is an unnecessary sequence, just because all you really needed to do was have a guy who happened to be part of this random detachment in the jungle that all of the people he was living with are dead now.
Yeah.
That's really all he needed to be the avenging figure in this movie. I think they had to add the dead wife component to where you didn't know at the very end if he wanted everyone dead. Like, what was his end game?
I think if he had a singular target, it would have been a lot better.
Yeah, no, it makes for a weird tone with this, because at this point you really aren't certain, like, is he really trying to kill the two guys that he had, and he was just weakened from the fight with them?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was the one who called the cops on them,
yes,
and got them drunk intentionally to do so. So you're kind of questioning it, but at the same time not, because the title of the movie is Triple Threat. But it's a little muddled, especially because he's the emotionally charged member of the group. He's the one that, in a cleaner script, should be the center of the story, actually.
Right.
He's the one that you should be most invested in. But his approach, this whole like subterfuge kind of angle he's playing, is wrong. Because the way he approached Tiger Chen is correct. This explosion of anger. When he sees Scott Adkins and is in close quarters with him, you would expect him to lash out at him or something. And in fact, there's a scene a little later in the movie where he's riding the back seat with like all the bad guys. And it's like, do them now. Like, fucking, they're right there. So like this Count of Monte Cristo shit feels like it I get what they're doing, but it doesn't fit this character.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been remedied if there was exactly one person he could blame for his wife's death.
Yes.
Where it's like, you are my target, not the whole unit, just that one guy.
And
then you could also play up the double agent angle where it's like, he's only helping himself to get to that one person. So when he's helping Tony and Tiger, maybe he's dicking them.
I think that some of it's that, and I think some of it too is, again, playing to the strengths of these characters, because anytime you're dealing with the ensemble stuff, like, you do have to do a certain level of fan service along the way where you're kind of acknowledging like how this person became a prevalent figure. Like, you saw a lot of that with the Expendables being the most obvious one, where it's just kind of like, there's a little callbacks to previous films. Iko, like, he's a good actor. And I think that the difference between him and the other two of the big three, that Tony Jaa has a natural charisma about him, and he's super fun. But most of his movies, like, they almost, you've always described them as being almost like a skateboarding video.
Yeah.
Like, it's more about the stunt work and the fighting choreography, and everything else is just kind of fill in to move the plot along. I mean, he made a movie about a freaking elephant, for Christ's sake.
He's kind of similar to Dave Bautista in the sense that he was never asked to act.
Yeah.
Until when they finally until they gave him a mic. It's like, oh, shit. He's good.
Well, and when you allow it to kind of certain natural things to come forward,
yeah,
like with Dave Bautista, it's like you realize, like, no, he can actually be really funny, or even charming, like if he needs to be.
Yeah,
like,
and you get weird roles like in Spectre, where it's like he's a mute villain. It's like he's a good talker though, and he's genuinely funny and engaging. Yeah, why would you do that? It's like, oh, it's because we started shooting that before all that Guardian shit took over.
Right.
But yeah, Tony is the fun character, and I do think that he was the one that probably should have been the Jackson. He probably should have got his head stepped on at some point. But at this point, like, it turns into like a full-on chase movie.
Yes.
It's kind of set at a breakneck pace, although unfortunately the plot diversions keep cropping up in the form of these talking heads and phone calls. There's this old Chinese man with like a fucking card table and like a Chinese flag behind him that he just looks so lonely in like this barren office environment, and he keeps making phone calls that nobody wants to pick up. He's just trying to save the billionaire heiress. And he has this poor assistant guy that keeps running in and like reporting things that we just saw in the movie like 5 minutes earlier. The old Chinese man reacts to it, makes a phone call, nothing comes of it. The point is, he's trying to save the heiress from his desk.
And again, these are things that are just thrown in there to really keep it from just being one continuous action sequence.
Although maybe it should have been.
I mean, yes, it probably should have been, because the action sequences are fantastic. It's the problem is there's too much of this stuff that kind of derails it from time to time. So they're making a break for the embassy, but that's Iko conveyed that that's where they're going to go. So naturally, Commando unit kind of breaks off and causes a diversion or explosion, something to block the traffic to that area.
Yeah.
So they're stuck in traffic trying to figure out a way to get there, and get spotted by the commando unit.
Yeah, Michael Bisping is the most conspicuous like soldier there's ever been. He tenses his hands over his eyes because it's sunny in Thailand, and he's just like, "Who's that over there? Oh, it's them!" And he's just like full on like Terminator sprints at them. It's like gigantic white man in Thailand running at you.
And again, there's no police like report out there that these same giant fellows in the same commando gear in the same van that just shot up the main police station and the biggest hotel in the area are just standing around by the Chinese embassy.
The Chinese fucking embassy.
So anyway, they, in a stolen car, Tony Jaa, Tiger Chen, and the gal peel off and try to make an escape. Yeah. And Scott Adkins on foot tracks them down, heads them off, darts down an alleyway, and leaps out and immediately gets hit by their car.
I thought he was dead. I was so scared that he was dead. Like, I've had this happen in other movies. Like, Executive Decision.
Yeah.
When Steven Seagal goes out the stealth bomber, it's like, oh, fuck! Steven Seagal never dies.
Emilio Estevez in the beginning of Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible, the elevator. It's just like, no! Like, it's too early for that. But yeah, this is a trailer shot that I remember seeing, and I was like, that better not be how Scott Adkins leaves this film. Yeah. It's just this beautiful side angle of Scott Adkins just charging down this alley. I don't even know if he sees the car. The car zips by. He jumps right in front of it. Bah! On the windshield. And the best part is he's like propped up on the windshield. The gal's driving. She's scared. Oh yeah, by the way, in the behind the scenes featurette after the credits, apparently she had to do her own stunt driving. I suspect it was budget related. She insists it was because the stunt driver, she was better than the stunt driver,
according to the director.
Yeah. We'll see. But anyway, the best part is that Scott Adkins is perched on the windshield, and he's not done. He starts hammer fisting the windshield, and the first couple hits, you're like, oh, he's not getting in. And then boom, he's in. It's like, oh shit, that was effective. And then he just does a T-1000 roll off of the windshield and gets up. Not even dust on him. He's fine. He's actually kind of pissed. And I think they crash.
They crash, yeah.
In front of the embassy, but they manage to escape. And
yes.
Iko helps them elude the tracking of the commandos by giving some disinformation and being altogether not helpful at all. And it needs to be said that Michael Jai White is onto him at this point.
Yes, Michael Jai White has suspicions that something's off.
Yeah, this is the beginning of a feud between the two of them.
Which, what would have convinced you of that when this man just always happens to be in the places that you're trying to go, and always one step behind what your target is? But...
Oh yeah, and whenever they're chasing them on foot, he's stationary.
Yeah.
He's just kind of watching. Seriously, he never chases them or even draws his gun or anything.
Yeah. So then he directs them to another police station, I believe.
Is this the restaurant?
Yeah, that's what it is.
I think
it's a restaurant.
They go into Only God Forgives town.
Yeah.
Lots of neon lighting in here. It's some sort of mini mall-esque thing, but it's really cramped, and there's a lot of flame red neons and stuff going on. And they take refuge in some sort of restaurant, and we get an attempt at a tension building scene where Michael Bisping goes in, says some not so good dialogue. Well, it's like a 2-stage line where it's health inspector, and he says, "I'm the rat exterminator." It's just leave out the second part, and you're fine. Because he had me for a second. They added that second part. It's, man, you lost it. Good thing you're talking to a guy who probably doesn't speak the best English. He doesn't know any better. And it turns out they're in the grease vent. And when they came out of there, I was like, are they gonna come out just covered in blah? No, they're fine.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Somewhere they're up in the ceiling. It's very similar to the vent scene in Die Hard.
Yeah,
where it's just kind of should be very obvious to the villain that's looking exactly where they're at, and somehow they completely miss it.
I mean, at that point, Carl, you would expect. I mean, he's alpha human being. You would think his nose would smell fucking Bruce Willis's sweat up in this.
Yeah, exactly.
That wife beater was pretty soaked by then, but there is a callback to Die Hard in this movie other than the vent scene, which is cute because again, these are action movies made by action fans.
Absolutely.
But yeah, they manage to elude Michael Bisping, and we get a quiet moment. Earlier in the film, I think we get a scene with the commandos all having a beer together, and
yeah, they have a few of those.
Yeah, they have a few of those, so you can see that they're all chummy. I mean, if we're being 100% honest here, they're framed as the villains, but they're all charismatic actors that I like. So Michael Jai White, even if he's supposed to be the bad guy, I'm like, hey.
Well, and that's again, my same stupid point I keep going back to. Yeah. But it's who's this movie made for? And that's where it gets difficult at times because we're Americans watching a movie that is in theory foreign, but we're in America watching this movie, and it's very confusing seeing this commando unit that you change two things could be the good guys of this film very easily. And so it is some of the framing of it is a little confusing because there are moments where you just kind of watch him and it's these all seem like decent dudes. Honestly,
they give Scott Adkins some casual racism that is effective. He has some actually pretty funny.
Well, but even the way they treat Iko, they just kind of met this guy in the street and all of a sudden they're buying him a beer and hanging out with him and slapping him on the back and stuff. They're very nice fellows for being murderous, horrible people.
They're not the worst guys in the world once you get to know them.
But that's kind of what I'm saying. It confuses you at times because it's
calling back to wrestling. This is why you don't have face versus face matches because it's very confusing. Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan was an oddity at the time. It's this doesn't happen because the audience doesn't know how to feel.
Yeah.
And when I see Michael Jai White being punched by people, I'm like, no. But then when he punches the other person, who I also like, I go, And it leads to a situation where it's like, I'm being entertained, but this is a conflict that needs to have an outcome.
Yeah.
And this is where you're trying to have it both ways. This is where you get King Kong versus Godzilla, where King Kong comes out of the water, but Godzilla's roars over the credits. So nobody lost.
Yeah, but it kind of goes back and forth between the two different groups kind of just hanging out, and you get this kind of cutesy sequence with Tiger Chen talking to the heiress about just in general, like, kind of who they are.
He gets some random fucking backstory.
Yeah.
When they're in prison together, him and Tony, at the police station, or jail, sorry. People care about those things. We get, like, a flashback.
That's right, because
it's like 3 shots of him fighting some gangsters, and, like, his dad is being hung in the middle of the room.
Well, and that's his motivation.
Yeah.
His motivation as a character is he's working with Tony Jaa to make enough money because he's a Chinese citizen that his dad and him moved to this tiny country to make money.
Yeah.
And the ultimate goal is to move back to China.
Yeah.
And apparently in the flashback sequence, it suggested that all the syndicate, the main overarching villains of this film, are the ones who kind of were putting the squeeze on him and his dad for money, and that's the reason they want to escape. So immediately that's supposed to be the connection between him and this heiress, that, like, in many ways they're the same but different sort of thing, and that she grew up here and always wanted to fix it but returned to her homeland. And
if you had a better actor and added some more layers to this character, again, this is something you could do something interesting with, where you have a character who's motivated by money in a situation where there's money to be made. If he wasn't the stoic Leonardo of the Ninja Turtles of this group, of the guy he's Captain America, Captain China. He always makes the right choice. Doesn't have many layers to him. He's just a good guy. But given his circumstances, it would probably be interesting for him to maybe consider, like, I could take the money and run, and then you get that classic action movie moment where Han Solo shows up, where it's like, oh, he ditched us, fuck that guy, and then he shows up at the end, you know, like...
Well, and I think if there were more acting chops with some of these people you're dealing with in this movie, that would be possible. Because I think what would have been a much more fascinating plot point is that he's the guy who's like, this is my ticket right here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to make money off of this woman. Like, instead, he plays out exactly like you're describing, which is he's the, just the white knight figure, essentially.
Yeah. I think it would have been more interesting to have at least... I mean, that's what you needed in this group, is one offbeat element to the group where it's like, we're not all on the same page, but we get there, because, I mean, that's part of the appeal of any team-up movie. That's how the Avengers worked. That's how you do it, is you get the band together, they have a little skirmish midway through the movie, and at the end, they click.
But I think that the biggest thing with him was just that, again, it's like, what is he supposed to represent? Yeah. And the overarching theme of this is kind of this Chinese nationalism that plays throughout it. And, he's like, oh, Chinese heiress is in danger. I must do everything in my power to save her.
Well, even the bodyguard lady, her dialogue, like, I don't know if it was...
She's, like, itching to throw herself in front of a bullet for this.
Yeah, no,
from the first second you encounter her.
She is, like, upset that she is not dead by the end of the movie.
I think she even mentions it at the end, that she wishes she had died. And...
like, no joke. Like, this lady is all about, like, I will lay down on the sword. I will lay down on all the swords so long as you survive. Special person.
Right. So his character gets hindered by that. And Tony Jaa at this point, he's cooking, and that's kind of he's the goofy cook guy who makes... Apparently he was a field cook when he was in some sort of military unit. He can cook amazing food out of anything. So he makes them a wonderful dinner. They all drink a bunch of beer, which is always the smartest thing to do when you're being pursued by crazy commando units.
Singha got paid, by the way. Big time.
Yeah, so they basically get drunk and eat all night. But the commando unit does the same thing.
Yeah, both parties are hungover by the time they meet.
And then basically Tony Jaa, is it Tony Jaa or is it at this point, it gets confusing because, again, there's so many of these moments where important plot points are happening just to give a reason why these characters time travel to whichever location they're going to.
Yeah.
I believe it's Tony Jaa. Oh, because he had mentioned earlier that he grew up in the area of the country they're in.
Yeah.
So he knows where the local syndicate is. And if they're going to fix this, they're going to have to go get some weaponry.
Yeah. In the meantime, I think they call Scott Adkins. They have his number. Actually, they call Michael Jai White. And there's a very cute scene here where they're in some sort of market or bar. Same thing. Pretty cool place. Michael Jai White is looking at bootleg DVDs. He's going, shit. But the last one he picks out, he says, oh, Donnie and Samo. And it's like, oh, he's talking about, real martial arts movies. I love that. But it's like looking at a kid like sorting through baseball cards. Like, got it, need it, got it. But he's like, shit. It was cute. I liked it. But yeah, he gets a call. He gets a FaceTime on his fucking cell phone, and he's like, "Hey, Collins, got a call from Tony Jaa."
Right.
And they have a video chat, and they decide they're going to do an exchange. Tony Jaa's like, "I got your woman that you want, and I want $100,000."
That's totally all I could think about was Austin Powers.
You can see him turning the numbers over in his head. Like, don't ask for too much, not too little. $100,000 and shifty eyes. That was a good one, right? And Collins is like, yeah, sure. $100,000 for a billionaire heiress? Why not? And so they hang up, and Scott Adkins gets some fun dialogue here. He asks Michael Jai White to recruit some locals, shooters, as he calls them. Mm-hmm. Michael Jai White's like, shooters. But yeah, they have a fun exchange, and it's basically set up that Scott Adkins is going to meet them. I think it was the old Polo Club.
Yeah, I forget what
I
they
think
said.
That's what
it's an old rundown building. It's actually a really cool setting for a final.
Yeah, really cool location.
Yeah, could have been an old church, could have been an old... It's some sort of old building.
Yeah, I think they refer to it as the old Polo Club, and the exteriors, and I don't know if the interior is the same location, but both are good locations. So they're going to meet up there, but Scott Adkins is going to show up with some extra muscle. And yeah, Tony Jaa is like, I know the local syndicate, so we're going to go meet up with them, and I'm going to call in a favor. And this is like a scene straight out of John Wick that feels a little out of place.
Very out of place. And I believe before we get too far, but I'm pretty sure it was the heiress's idea to kind of set up this fake, because they're aware it's going to be a double cross on both sides.
Yeah.
Everyone knows.
Tony Jaa doesn't betray them when he pulls out his phone. Ha! Fooled you both.
No, it was very much kind of like both sides know it's just a bloodbath in the making, but it's presented as, hey, we're going to have this exchange. And Scott Adkins' intention is they're going to get there early with all this extra muscle and take them all out.
Yeah.
And basically, Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen are going to arm themselves and go in and fuck shit up.
Yeah, so we go to Michael Wong's house.
Yep.
I didn't know that he was going to actually make an appearance in the film proper, because up until this point, I think we've only seen the back of his head.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, okay, hey, Michael Wong. And apparently he and Tony Jaa have history. Tony Jaa's character's name is Payu, I believe.
Yes.
In the local tongue. I don't know if it's supposed to be Thai or if it's a made-up word. I guess it means storm or something. But I guess he got his name from his fighting prowess and his killing ability.
Yeah.
Which seems kind of weird, being as he's also the clown.
And it's an unnecessary detail at this point, because he's already proven himself to be more than competent.
Yeah,
you really don't need to add to it that he has this dark backstory as being a former criminal. Like you really could just say he served in the military and just was really good at it.
It felt like a disparate element that's I don't know that I needed that. And I think they wisely knew that, because Tony Jaa actually cuts him off and says, hey, shut up. We don't want to get into that, because we forgot to write that part. But Michael Wong makes reference to cashing in a chip. So I guess Tony Jaa has a favor over him.
Mm-hmm.
And he turns on the lights, and the room is lined with weapons, and it's a good old fashioned arming up scene.
Yep.
We get some assault rifles and some knives, and we head off on our riverboat to the polo club.
After Michael Wong points his finger and yells at the heiress about how her donation won't do anything.
I'll show you. My money will fix everything.
Yeah. It's there. It's supposed to be like, even though we were the very people you're trying to eradicate, you had to come to us for one of those things that didn't need to be there.
Yeah, he basically mouths off to her about oh yeah, you think you're gonna stop the syndicate? It's like a hydra. You cut off one head, another grows back in its place.
Yeah, and it's one thing that constantly happens throughout this movie, and I think it's just these actors in general, but little too charismatic of a figure for that part. If you're gonna have this stupid sequence where he's gonna yell at her about how you're never gonna take out this syndicate, you're just kind of, when you first see him, you're like, wow, he's helping him out. That's cool. Just leave it at that. It's really all you need. That's what movies like John Wick have now. It's you have this neat figure that has a bunch of guns, a cachet, or where. Just leave it at that. You don't need to have anything more depth to it.
Or Kickboxer, they had the expat guy that just happened to have a fucking M16 and a grenade launcher on him.
Well, that's what, you just have him be the criminal and just kind of have him be menacing from afar, and it's yeah, go ahead and take the shit, and, it doesn't need to be set explicitly you're trying to take us out, but,
Well, the thought, what I thought they were doing was that, maybe he was playing them against the mystery lady.
It is confusing just because he's on the phone multiple times with various members of the quote-unquote bad guys, I guess.
Yeah,
so.
I think maybe it was supposed to be conveyed as that, but it was a little muddled. I mean, if that's the angle they were playing, then it makes sense to me. It's simple enough to follow, but it just wasn't conveyed correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we head off to the polo club, and it's nighttime now. We got some fire barrels going, which lead to some pretty cool lighting. Upstairs looks like the early parts of a Meatloaf music video with lots of curtains blowing.
Yes.
Lots of white curtains and blue lighting. I'd do anything for love. And then I believe Tiger Chen walks in with Selena Jade, and he and Scott Adkins have a bit of an exchange. So they're talking, and Tony Jaa is sneaking around capping people with his silenced assault rifle, and no joke, he kills all the hired guns.
All of them.
And then he decides to take his silencer off to kill the last two, because I guess he's feeling good about himself. So obviously the exchange doesn't go as planned. Nobody gets paid. Tiger Chen ushers Selena Jade to cover, and we all start shooting at each other. And then by this point, we have a certain number of figures left on the table. It's pretty obvious we're going to start pairing off, and some shit's going to start happening. Hopefully.
Yeah. It's basically 3 versus 3, though, at this point. Yeah,
it's kind of perfect. One objection was the way the hired guns were dismissed so uneventfully. It's why even have them?
Yeah, it was...
And especially for Tony Jaa. Because one thing that's kind of absent from this movie is group fights.
Yeah.
There are not any crowd fights. Traditional, especially Hong Kong martial arts movies, you're used to seeing the 20-on-1 thing or whatever. It's kind of bullshit, but it's always fun to watch. And Tony Jaa in particular is noteworthy for that.
Yeah.
There's that one scene in Tom Yum-goong that Ron Smorenberg is in exclusively to have his leg broken because he's flexible. Where 50 guys run at him all in sequence, and he dispatches them one after the other. It's spectacular. It's stupid, but it's fun. And
that would have been really cool.
It would have been great to see our 3 heroes cut loose on a bunch of jobbers.
Well, and it also, I think that was a sequence. They should have had a more explicit moment of Iko kind of showing he's there with them. There really isn't that sequence for a movie called Triple Threat.
Yeah, the
where all 3 of them are kind of back to back. I mean, it's corny, but that's how these movies are supposed to go. And yeah, they should wipe out a whole room full of jobbers. Well, that would be awesome.
That would have been amazing, because that's the moment where the team coalesces. And you're right, we never really did get that. We get 2 at a time, but not really.
Yeah, there's moments where they kind of help each other out, but it's always because one of them's been dispatched or disposed of in some way. Like there's never
we're spoiled by like they call it like the Avengers like glamour shot where it's the
360
I mean
shot. That's the ultimate one.
That's the ultimate one. It's very hard to top. In fact, they tried in subsequent films and kind of fell flat on their face. Looking at you, Age of Ultron, but yeah, it would have been nice to like see the group all come together and do some group choreography, like shit, like slingshotting each other into people, or like alley oops, or like group clotheslines.
Well, and more so, because I guess this is going to lead into it, because basically really all you need to know for these final sequences, they all kind of break off into individual fights with individual members. Yeah. Like, who is it? It's Tiger gets Michael Bisping, Tony Jaa, and fights with
Scott
Adkins, and Iko fights with Michael Jai White, who kind of knew all along he was double crossing him, and they all put up pretty good fights.
Yeah, they do the one thing that I tend to object to in action movies, where you're cutting from one fight to another.
Mm-hmm.
They're all pretty well choreographed scenes and pretty well executed. It's very hard to nail down the timing on when to cut from one to the other. I really did like what they did with Tony Jaa and Scott Adkins, where Tiger and Iko, both of their fights are strictly just martial arts fights. And in fact, Tiger and Michael Bisping, the exploration of the environment's kind of fun. They go through some walls, so like they have a lot of movement in that scene. But Tony and Scott Adkins, while these fist fights are happening, they're still armed. They're still shooting at each other, and they're kind of maneuvering through the polo club or whatever. So it gives you a good editing excuse to like relegate that to the end of the sequence, because they're still doing their thing. They're not quite doing what the other guys are doing yet.
But I was going to say with these last final fights, and I think the reason that we really needed jobbers in it is because one of the reasons, like, some of the coolest stuff would come out of like different parts of the world, like when it comes to martial arts movies and all, is because you can get around certain like stunt rules, like for an American movie, for instance. Like, it's hard to get people who are willing to get punched in the face to make a movie. In fact, I don't think it's legal, really. You can do it like accidentally, inadvertently or whatever, but like the whole point is to kind of like mimic these things, versus like so many great Jackie Chan movies and all kind of came from two people really just kicking the shit out of each other.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Benny Urquidez was not known for pulling his punches.
Well, no, and all these guys, like, that's kind of their thing. Like, that's how they got to be established, was a lot of these guys were willing to put themselves on the line, get beat up to make a sequence look amazing. It's a lot harder to do that when you're dealing with people on similar tiers. And even though these aren't A-list superstars, they're still big enough where they can't afford to break their nose.
They're big enough that they have stunt doubles.
They either have stunt doubles or just the choreography has to be toned down a bit. And when you're fighting with jobbers, they can be anybody. You can literally have them fighting professional stunt people, which usually they are in these instances, where it doesn't matter if the guy gets flung off or something or whatever, because that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
You know, you can have some riskier things in there. As it stands, when you have these one-on-one fights with these bigger named actors, it plays out like wrestling. Well, and when it plays out like wrestling, the problem I have with it, especially with Scott Adkins, is it reminds me too much of, who's the guy recently came about? I believe his name is Virgil. Or
Virgil?
Not Virgil. The guy who does flips and stuff like that. He's came about very recently.
Oh, the acrobat. I know who you're talking about. It's not Virgil.
It's not Virgil. Virgil was back in the
He was
80s.
The butler guy.
Yeah.
He was Ted DiBiase's valet. Oh, man, it's right on the tip of my tongue. But he does the Red Arrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
The difference between like there's always been acrobatic wrestlers throughout, but they typically
Neville, maybe.
Neville, that's who it is. Scott Adkins is Neville in this movie.
Okay.
And when I say that, Neville is amazing. The stuff he does is incredible. But what sucks about it is it's when it's on display, like everything stops.
It's true.
Because everybody in the crowd just is in awe of what he's doing. And with Scott Adkins, some of the flips and crazy kicks he does, that's kind of how the action works. And especially when you're bouncing between three fights at all, it's really like throws you for a loop when all of a sudden this guy busts out with something that's so far and above anything anyone else is doing. Like, he makes Bisping look so embarrassing.
It was actually kind of amazing, because this is why I like Scott Adkins. This is why I've followed his career so extensively since I watched Undisputed 2, is that when you jump from his stuff to someone else, there is a clear difference in quality. Like,
right.
he is a step above most people.
But what I was going to say is, like, we've always seen, like, acrobatic wrestlers. But the problem was they were usually either little Asian guys or little Mexican guys, and the typical American audience was never that big of a fan or as impressed seeing these guys do these crazy acrobatic things. For whatever reason, racism.
Maybe.
When you see a guy like a Jeff Hardy come along, everyone is just in awe of their things. The difference is when a Jeff Hardy or a Daniel Bryan would do these crazy athletic moves, there was always kind of this, it was like watching a skateboard video or something. It was like, this guy might break his neck doing it, but we're all going to be really excited if he pulls it off. It took you a long time to realize, like, no, he's just that athletic that he's got it down. But most of the time he was just kind of launching himself. When Neville goes out there, he's so talented because he's a true gymnast. He's going to nail it every time.
Yeah.
And that's Scott Adkins, too. Like, when he does his sequences, like, you expect it to perfection. You get it.
It's like clockwork.
But it's almost too good in that sense. Because
I know what you mean. And even in terms of setup, too, where it's like you need to get these, like, glamour shots because what's being shown to you, if it's not showcased properly, it's like a disservice.
It's a waste, yeah.
Yeah, like the example you're using with Neville, when he does the red arrow, the guy on the mat is making sure he's in the right spot and nobody is hitting the ropes, because if he fucks it up, he's dead.
Well, and that's when the crowd, too, like you had mentioned earlier about being like the smart marks, where at that point they don't care if they see the guy who's supposed to be like, injured on the mat kind of repositioning himself a bit, because they know that there's a lot that goes into this. You're no longer witnessing a wrestling match. You're watching a feat of gymnastics, essentially.
No, you want to see him hit the triple Indy.
And that was the one thing I would say that bummed me out about these last fight sequences, is I really kind of wanted to see either two guys going toe to toe with those kind of things, or just cut that out and just focus on, the brutal one-on-one action. Because as it stood out, like I said, Scott Adkins' abilities look so far and above in terms of stunt work.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is fair given, but that's me just looking at it from an outsider. The true fans of it know what's going on.
Well, a little bit of a detriment in the film is the tone. That because it's akin to like an Expendables or something, this is a fan film. This is meant to be crowd pleasing. And in order to be crowd pleasing, I don't think anybody would picture, I guess, like Scott Adkins getting in a Raid-esque life and death battle with Iko Uwais that lasts 10 minutes and has, chunks of faces getting torn off and stuff.
This is true.
Because Scott Adkins has fans, and one, it is still unusual to see him as like the bad guy, and two, it's like that's too brutal. Like that's not what we're paying to see. We're paying to see everyone's greatest hits. It just so happens that Scott Adkins is the one with the greatest hits. Like Iko Uwais' greatest gift as a performer and a choreographer is that he's so goddamn fluid and malleable.
Yeah.
You put him in there with a guy that does Tai Chi. You put him in there with a guy who does Taekwondo. You put him in there with fucking 250-pound Michael Jai White, and he performs ably. Yeah. Scott Adkins, though, has his own kicks. It's like, he has kicks that like people think of him when they see it. Yeah. It's like Van Damme's like leaping, spinning back kick. It's like he does have like specific beats that if you don't see it, you're gonna be a little disappointed. Yeah. It's like if The Rock doesn't do the rock bottom or the people's elbow. You're like, what? He won and he didn't do any of his signature moves? That's some bullshit. But yeah, the fights, the way they're packaged, as far as I recall, Michael Bisping and Tiger Chen go at it, and simultaneously, Iko and Michael Jai White square off. Obviously, the latter gets a little bit more gravitas applied to it because this has actually had some build. So Michael Jai White's like, aha, got you now. And Iko has this really fun martial arts movie moment where he has an assault rifle. Mm-hmm. He empties the clip into the magazine, rather, into the floor. And so, right, yeah. For this I will kill you. And they square off, and this is where I think both you and I were like, yay, Michael Jai White decided to work today. Because, yeah, he actually acquits himself quite ably, as he always does. But up until this point in the movie, he was drinking beer and driving the whole time.
And I will say, I'm not shitting on the end of the movie by any stretch, because actually, everything you said is there.
Yeah.
Like, they do a service to the fans of all these actors. They do get to showcase what they're good at.
Absolutely.
I was kind of hoping to see just a bit more, and I think that they could have done it if they had more time with all of them, maybe. Again, I would like to see Scott Adkins versus all three of the guys.
I know.
I think really what I'm trying to say, because Michael Jai White handles himself great, and Bisping is admirable for being a first role.
Yeah,
and again,
absolutely.
especially in the level of guys he's like on film with, you know.
Yeah, we forgot to mention he has a skirmish with Tiger Chen earlier in the movie, and again, he performs quite ably.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's something to work with for him. But
it's all just timing and understanding what the camera does to your performance.
Yes, well, and just trying not to murder the person.
Trying not to murder the person, but yeah, he does a little bit of waiting. I think it's called having egg on your face, where like he'll be a step ahead in the choreography, where it's like he's already holding his hand for the block for the blow that hasn't come yet.
Yeah,
and his footwork's a little confused at times, where it's like, I know this isn't right, but this is where your feet need to be to hit the beats that you need to hit.
I just think if you had a Scott Adkins versus all three,
I wanted that very badly.
Some of those moves I'm describing wouldn't stand out as much as just being because yeah, they are because like I said, most of the action actually up until this point is very utilitarian and realistic.
Yeah,
it's not until Scott Adkins starts hand-to-hand combat that all of a sudden he busts out these crazy flip kicks that he does and is amazing for, and I love seeing him. I love that shit, but it does kind of come out of nowhere, and it's very like
stylistically, it is very different from everything we've seen up to this point.
Which would have been really cool again if he's kicking all three guys at once. But when it's just like him versus Tony Jaa, and at this point you really want to see Tony Jaa beat his ass. Like it's kind of like, whoa, you just did that. How are you gonna one up that one?
Yeah, it's like I don't know, guys. Like I don't know if you're gonna top that. But yeah, Tiger Chen and Michael Bisping fight for a bit. Like I said, they go through a wall. It's pretty cool. There's a funky beat in here that, like, I don't know if this is to appeal to Chinese audiences or whatever, but he says to Michael Bisping, "We don't have to do this."
Yeah.
And Michael Bisping's like, "Yes, we do!" And it felt straight out of, like, Ip Man 2 or something, where poor Darren Shalavi, rest his soul, he did pass. 80% of his dialogue in that movie is, "Come on! Come on! Come on!" But yeah, he ends up hitting Michael Bisping in the head with a cinder block. We don't have to do this. Meanwhile, Iko and Michael Jai White are going at it upstairs, and the editing is a little funky here because Iko is like working his legs, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
He's a gigantic fucking dude. But the way it's edited, we're cutting back and forth between these two fights, and it looks like Iko's doing fine. But then we cut back, and he's like on the floor, and he's got blood coming out of his mouth, and it's like, oh, I guess he's losing now. And Michael Jai White starts like countering him and handling him pretty badly, and out of nowhere, very much out of nowhere, very similar to the police station, Tiger Chen just kind of shows up and like launches himself into Michael Jai White, and I think Iko drop kicks him, and he falls onto like a banister that's been broken and gets impaled. And it's just this very sudden end to this very personal fight that didn't feel earned at all. It's like, oh, so Iko is really bad at avenging his wife. He's very bad at it because he keeps telling everyone, "For this, I will kill you with my bare hands." And I don't think he kills a single person with his bare hands.
And that, again, but who's the movie made for? Like, is that because, again, it's tough enough for him making some of these movies because you're not even supposed to hit people in the head, like in certain parts of the world. Yeah.
No more steel chair shots to the head.
Yeah, and in the end, he is the only one whose hands are clean, kind of walking away from it.
I guess, but he and Michael Jai White have had this feud. It's the only feud in the whole movie, and he just kind of gets the guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't defeat him. He he wins.
Yeah.
Which nobody likes a draw, even if, one guy dies. Which brings us to Tony Jaa and Scott Adkins. It's everything you'd want it to be.
Yes.
It's all too brief, unfortunately. But both guys get to do their signature movements. There's some pretty fucking great handwork, which is maybe my favorite thing in choreography. Like, big flashy kicks are good. They're like exclamation points in your punctuation tool set.
Yeah.
You don't use them all the time, but when you do, it's like, it's like, it's like if The Rock did a DDT over and over and over again, you'd get pretty fucking tired of it.
I don't know. Every video game I ever played with them, that's
well, yeah, you got to get that special meter up, and you got to do the signature move to do that fast. But every once in a while, you got to do the punches with the look at the palm, the slap punch or whatever, where they do the backflip. But yeah, the handwork in the scene is pretty great, and it's those half beats.
Yes,
where it looks like filler, but if it's done right, it looks amazing, and it doesn't look rehearsed. It doesn't look choreographed, which is the kind of stuff I like. I was always critical of Yuan Wu Ping on the Matrix movies and some of his other movies, where his favorite filler beat in his fights is roll up person's arm under your armpit and then punch him in the stomach like 3 times and then break off and do something else because we ran out of ideas. Thankfully, there's none of that in this scene. But Tony Jaa, always a dynamic performer. His lunging knees look dangerous as fuck. Like, I would not want to be the guy on the receiving end of that because I know he's coordinated, but Jesus fuck. like
I said, some of that stuff you don't fake. You just take it and kind of...
I mean, Scott Adkins does allude to taking some bumps on the set, so it's like, I'm sure everybody did, but it paid off. And yeah, we get his trademark elbow strikes, his lunging knees, lots of aerial work. And then Iko shows up. And we get a bit of 2-on-1 stuff. And it's, again, pretty spectacular.
Very brief, but
it's way too brief. It Star Wars Episode 2. Like, I like how in the trailer they show Anakin with his 2 lightsabers. Literally just that shot is like the entirety of the fight with him using 2 lightsabers. It's pitiful, but way too brief. It's unfortunate too because I forgot to mention this film is choreographed by Tim Man, who Scott Adkins and Jesse Johnson have both worked with many times by this point. And he seems to have a gift for 2-on-1 fights. We've seen it before in Accident Man, which I think was actually filmed after this, and which was Ray Park and Michael Jai White versus Scott Adkins. It's a good one. And Undisputed 4, Tim Man himself is involved in it. It's a 2-on-1 fight between him, another gentleman whose name I can't recall, and Scott Adkins. And in a movie with many, many good fights, I'd say that's actually the highlight.
Okay.
So he seems to have a knack for that. Which makes it all the more disappointing that it's like, oh. But, again, low-budget film, scheduling, I'd imagine that would be a reason for kind of having a shorter fight. Good stuff, but too brief, and you would like to have seen Iko spotlighted a bit more. Unfortunately, he's kind of sidelined throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, he really never gets a signature thing.
The opening with Tony Jaa, actually, I think is his best moment in the whole movie. Just that, 20-second skirmish in the camp.
And like I said, I feel like that one gets hindered by you don't necessarily grasp the gravity of that.
Yeah, there's no emotional stake at that point. He's angry. You don't know a thing about Tony.
Yeah, like that could have been such a different sequence if you even just had a sequence of him looking up after holding his dying wife and seeing Tony Jaa holding a gun looking at him. Yeah, honestly, that could have been a brilliant little beat because it does set that kind of tone, but then the rest of the plot is that he immediately befriends him after getting his butt kicked by him. So, but movies like this aren't heavy on plot. So
no, but then the fight takes a weird turn.
Yeah.
Scott Adkins wins. He incapacitates both guys. Iko falls off the balcony and through a table. My God! And he's just out. And I thought he was going to get up, but he didn't. I was so disappointed in him. I was like, you mean you get your ass kicked for 10 minutes straight in the raid? You fight 50 people at the end of the raid 2. with multiple lacerations, but you fall through a table and you're out? The fuck, man? Hopefully he was doing something better with his time. But yeah, Scott Adkins dispatches both Tony Jaa and Iko Uwais, and he heads downstairs, and he picks up his rifle, and now he's coming for the girl. Mm-hmm. And he gets ready to shoot her, and he's pretty pissed. But then Tiger Chen shows up and takes a bullet for her, bodyguard style.
Yeah.
Or, what, In the Line of Fire, the Clint Eastwood movie? Or
yeah.
Yeah. And then they don't fight. Which was very surprising. Yeah, he and Tiger Chen never exchanged blows. Sure. He gets angry because apparently that was his last bullet, and he has some choice words about killing Chinese women. And then Tony Jaa comes down the stairs, and he's mad. He's gone Super Saiyan. And he says, like, I think, you left me for dead twice, it won't happen a third time. And now we're in the main, like, foyer or whatever, and we have our flame barrel lit upstairs is where we fought before, and that's with the meatloaf lighting with the curtains.
Yeah.
In a dining hall of some sort. Now we're in the foyer where, like, there's the fire barrel, so it's pretty cool lighting. And very disappointed. Very disappointed. Tony Jaa wins. Just one-on-one, Tony Jaa wins. Just,
knives are involved.
Knives come out at some point. Again, they do the little man, big man thing where Tony starts like working the joints and stuff. It's a classic of his repertoire. He does it in a lot of his movies. That's how you take down an elephant. It doesn't sell as well because Scott Adkins, while jacked to shit, is actually not that tall.
Yeah,
he doesn't look like a super big guy next to Tiger.
He looks very comparable in size.
Yeah.
Other than like his body, like he's clearly in much better shape. But yeah, he just kind of wins. They have a back and forth. He starts working the joints. Scott Adkins starts to weaken a bit, so he pulls out a knife, a dirty pool. Like, it's like he pulled out the equalizer, the brass knucks. You can't do that. And Tony Jaa also has a knife, and he stabs him in both the man boobs, and just falls down and dies. And the whole time I'm just like, what is happening? Like, yeah, a bit of a Chekhov's gun too. With a specific gun is before all the action kicks off, they hide the heiress. Tiger Chen pulls her aside and tells her, like, here's a gun, hold on to it, when point and shoot, basically. The classic, empty the clip, you're good.
Steven Seagal tells it to every woman he's ever saved.
Yes. So, yeah, in a position that Scott Adkins should have been in any other movie, the character who comes back from the dead is Michael Bisping instead.
Yeah, Michael Bisping does the Alexander Goodenough. He does the Carl.
Yeah. And just like Carl is dispatched by a character who has no purpose in shooting a gun the whole entire movie. But
yeah.
The heiress shoots him, takes him out.
And now she's scarred for life.
Yeah, she's killed more people than Iko in this entire movie.
Seriously. The staircase got that kill, not Iko.
Yeah, so it's a really... kind of just...
It's a little rushed and clumsy because I think I've mentioned it before on the show. There's a movie called Invisible Target, I think. It's a Chinese movie. The finale involves our three characters, our three main protagonists, fighting Jing Wu, or Wu Jing, the fellow from the Wolf Warrior movies. And throughout the movie, he has been demonstrated to be leaps and bounds ahead of them in terms of martial arts ability. In real life or otherwise. And the way that fight is staged, we get to see all three of them one at a time with him, and then at the end it takes all three of them to take him out, and it feels so earned, where it's like they literally couldn't have won if they weren't a triple threat. Mm-hmm. And that's really all I needed to see was imagine Scott Adkins being killed in the same way, like having his like limbs taken out one at a time, except it's like, oh, it's all three of them.
Yep.
And they're all helping each other. And they even do this amazing beat in Invisible Target where one guy's like lunging at Wu Jing and he's trying to punch him, but he can't quite reach. And then the other guy has to push his knuckles forward. And then the third guy like rams into their back. And it's one fist, but 3 people sitting behind the force of it. So they triple punch him. It's amazing.
Well, and that's kind of, honestly, would have been a fun end to it versus the way it feels. Again, it's the weird tone where, and we established why it was, but when you have Scott Adkins busting out all these crazy, insane acrobatic things, and then it just kind of ends in a very, like, utilitarian sort of, like, this is probably how a skirmish like this would end. 2 knives get involved and the guy gets stabbed. Mm-hmm. And that's it. The big bad villain is just...
But at the very least, it needed to be Iko's kill.
But I think from the audience standpoint, I think it was very important to have him end it without getting his hands dirty. Like, I mean, yes, he fought and stuff, but he didn't kill anybody the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, he's actually
And Tony's character is the one who's established to have the dark past. So it
yeah, all the other ones are like soldiers, so they have an excuse. But for whatever reason, Iko's the guy. He avenges his wife, but at the same time does it without having to be a murderer.
Also, in Asian territories in particular, like worldwide, I'm not so sure, but Asia, Tony Jaa actually has a lot of cachet. Mm-hmm. Like, so I could see him as being like perceived as the headliner, where it's like, oh, you didn't have him and Scott Adkins fight? How dare you? Yeah,
no, I think probably at the time most of this was filmed, he definitely was. I would say Iko's the bigger name now.
Tony Jaa has been popping up in Chinese movies a lot lately. Mm-hmm. What was it? I forget the name of it, but it was a Wilson Yip movie, and he's in the new Ip Man side story, and SPL 2. So he is a force in Chinese cinema. I say they adopted him. So like really, they just kind of like said, "Oh, you can hang out with us now. You're not doing anything in Thailand, right?"
I just feel like there were a lot of like very subtle moments too that were like China's the obvious market for this, but like there were a lot pointed at Indonesia. I feel like too. Like,
it is mentioned a couple of times. It's a word that doesn't pop up in American English very often. So honestly, it's not a word that gets spoken very often coming from American lips. But yeah, Michael Jai White does make mention of his Indonesian heritage a couple times.
Well, and there's that like one character too, he's like a general or something in the jungle at the very beginning where he like makes a comment like, you're pretty tall for a Burmese or something like that. And he's like, I'm Indonesian, and then they shoot him. It's a very weird sequence, but it's almost like, but that's the whole thing. Like, you have to remember, being an American watching things is like representation for a tiny country is a huge deal, and it's not a tiny country.
No, Indonesia's vast.
But in terms of like a market or whatever, we consider it to be a very small.
And like thanks to Netflix and stuff, we've seen that there's something going on in Indonesian cinema right now. Mm-hmm. Where we're getting a lot of martial arts movies specifically imported from Indonesia.
But that's what I'm saying is like I do wonder if some of Iko's character was adapted to be more appealing to that audience.
In fact, put it this way, Mahajaya is not a real country. Indonesia is.
Right.
They could have said he's from anywhere.
And also, I would not be shocked. Not going to take the time to go back and look, but really, like I said, that is a big thing, like over in certain parts of the world, like even just like contact with the head. And not only did he not kill anybody, but I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't even hit anybody really in the face. Like just because it's very specific for a reason. Despite this guy's whole character supposed to be this avenging warlord, he doesn't drink, he doesn't kill. It's a little...
Yeah, there's something
interesting.
Yeah, like, good point. I do remember the not drinking thing, and he is kind of framed as being a mostly righteous figure despite having violent intent.
Yeah, the fact that he buries all of his whole unit of people who are killed, even though they're all supposed to be just random guns for hire.
He would have been 3 days behind them.
Right?
But yeah, our film concludes with the Chinese embassy pulled through. They sent the cops to the polo club. And Chinese bodyguard lady, she's still alive, unfortunately for her. She's very
deep
upset.
regrets over this.
Deep regrets over this. She wishes she had caught that bullet just a few inches to the left or the right. She shows up. She's like, "Eris, are you okay?" And yeah, she is. And yeah, just a happy ending for everyone, I guess. Even Iko, he seems at peace.
Ends that way with them all just kind of laughing.
Yeah,
even though they've all been shot and beaten to shit.
But... Yeah, Tiger's been shot. Tony got cut or stabbed. despite getting his ass kicked by Scott Adkins a few minutes earlier, by the end of the movie, in terms of like the damage he's displaying, it's like akin to a Steven Seagal beating, where it's like in Under Siege, like maybe the only wound that he incurs in that whole movie is he allows Tommy Lee Jones to like snick him right on the eyebrow, and that's it. So everybody's fine.
I was going to say, at the end of the day, like, the big question I kept asking, who's this movie made for? And I would make the strong argument, like, yes, there's all the international audiences that were a big pool, but I think the director did a fantastic job, at the very least, making it very apparent why all these figures should matter in cinema. Like, it is for fans like yourself of these lower tier action movies that are always going to be prevalent and are very important. There's a big audience for this stuff. Like, you know, it's actually kind of neat seeing it now that it's its own separation. Now there's a very defined A-list for action movies versus when we were younger, where all action movies kind of got lumped together.
Yeah.
Now there's a very distinctive, like, there's Hollywood A-list action, and now there's this second tier that, you know, your high point might be featured on Netflix or something. But that's a huge market in itself.
That's a gigantic platform, and there's tons of possibilities for eyes to find you.
Yeah, and there's plenty of aspiring martial artists and wannabe action stars and all that who are going to grow up loving this stuff. And I think that the coolest thing about this is it follows through in its duty of being essentially an acknowledgement of all that these guys have done in their own way. Like, they do showcase all of their abilities.
Yeah, it does a very good job of attempting to balance things and allowing everybody to have at least a moment.
Yeah,
nobody
that's
feels
really
like
what
they
it
got
is.
shafted. Even Dominique Vandenberg, who does almost nothing in this movie, he gets a spectacular random death. Like, it feels like a film that was taken seriously during production and has some love put into it, and that's mostly what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting this to be anyone's best work.
No.
But the novelty of seeing all of these personalities on screen together, like, I got what I wanted. Like,
and I think it came out, despite the rocky kind of release or whatever, I think it came out at the perfect time in all their careers, because a few of those guys are pretty close to falling off. Yeah, like I said, Bisping is going to have a career. It's probably not going to be the best one.
He and Wade Barrett need to make a movie together.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. It'd be like the Barbarian Brothers, but British.
They should do a British soccer hooligan version of Goon.
Oh man, that would be amazing. Just like two shithead brothers.
Two brothers.
Yeah, that's a script that needs to get written.
No, but that's really, like, at the end of the day, it was worth it for that, because anybody who's seen any of these movies, like, it will make you happy to see that at least somebody gets it. Like,
yeah, no, it's. I mean, I've heard the Avengers described as a cinematic high five, where it's like, we got to the finish line, we did it.
Yeah,
and like that's why the last half hour of that movie is just like awesomeness. It's like there's not even any real tension to it. It's just like watch awesome people do awesome things. And this movie kind of feels like that, where it's like it's almost like a gift to all these people, almost as like a paying tribute to all these great actors.
And that's, I guess, the Avengers is a perfect like comparison. That, like, I've always contended that, like, the reason the Avengers works is that they modeled all of these actors, like fictional characters, after the actors' personalities,
like wrestling.
Yeah, like
everything is wrestling.
No, but like, because they allow that, it makes it easy for these actors to show up and just bang it out, because it's, you know, it's not a stretch. Like, there's not a lot of effort. I mean, there's enough effort. Like, they don't phone it in, but like, because it's just a heightened, exaggerated version of themselves, it goes pretty smoothly.
Yeah, and the person you're following on Twitter is pretty close to the person that you're seeing on the screen.
Exactly, but that's what I was saying. What's neat with this is you're dealing with people who, it's not the personality or the acting, it's the choreography and the action component of it.
Yeah.
And that's allowed to really stand out, and it's very distinctive, and got to be really tough to choreograph all those different, like, levels of talent.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would think, like, agility is a big part of it, where it's like Michael Jai White is a capable performer, but he is a very large man and moves at a different pace than someone like Iko Uwais. So, like, finding that push and pull, like finding the proper rhythm to get these two performers synced up, on schedule because needs to be said, a lot of like Hong Kong movies in particular, like the amount of time they set aside for fight scenes is like weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like even in Hollywood movies, it's like good luck finding weeks to do a single scene that you know involves the top talent. Like Robert Downey Jr. is not going to like devote weeks to doing like a fight scene or something. Like fuck that. So like I seriously doubt they had a huge amount of time to put these scenes together, but they did. So any complaints I have about like the brevity of some of the sequences or like flaws in like editing or whatever, it's like I get it. They didn't have a lot of time and money, and they made a decent product anyway, and I'm happy for it.
Yeah.
So on that note, I guess we're wrapping up here, but thank you again, brother, for coming to the theater with me, because this actually meant something to me. Like, I know it's like a tiny, tiny movie that I won't shut up about, but nobody else seems to even know exists. But for me to have an opportunity to see it in theaters, like a film that apparently only screened on 150 theaters for a single fucking night, it's pretty big deal to me, and I'm really glad I got to see it, and I look forward to actually checking it out again.
No, it was great, great experience, and I'm happy to have seen it.
All right, well, thanks again for joining me. Tune in next time.